What if I told you that every single emotion you've ever felt has been a lie? Not the feeling itself, but what you've been taught it means. Society has convinced you that emotions are sacred, that they're your authentic self speaking, that you should honor them and follow them wherever they lead. But here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to tell you. Your emotions are not your friend. They are not your guide to happiness. They are primitive survival mechanisms left over from a world that no longer exists, and they are sabotaging every area of your life. Every day, you make decisions based on how you feel in the moment. You get angry and say things that destroy relationships. You feel anxious and avoid opportunities that could change your life. You get overwhelmed and quit on dreams that matter to you. You let fear keep you small, let anger make you cruel, and let sadness convince you that you're powerless. You are being controlled by chemical reactions in your brain, and you don't even realize it. But what if I told you that the most successful people in the world, the ones who seem unshakable and always in control, have mastered a skill that you've never even been taught exists? The ability to feel any emotion without being controlled by it. The ability to experience anger without reacting in anger. To feel fear without being paralyzed by it. To experience sadness without drowning in it. This is not about becoming emotionless. This is about becoming emotionally intelligent. This is about taking back control of your life by mastering the space between what you feel and how you respond. By the time you finish this audiobook, you will never be the same person who started listening. You will have the tools to control your emotions instead of being controlled by them. You will learn how to stay calm under pressure, make better decisions when stakes are high, and build the kind of inner strength that separates winners from everyone else. Chapter 1. The hidden cost of being controlled by your emotions. Most people have no idea how much their emotional reactions are costing them. They think it's normal to get triggered. They think it's human nature to lose control when things get difficult. They think that following their emotions is authentic and healthy. They are wrong, and this delusion is destroying their lives in ways they cannot even see. Let me paint you a picture of what emotional slavery actually looks like. You're in a meeting with your team. Someone questions your proposal in a way that feels disrespectful. Your heart starts racing. Your face gets hot. The voice in your head starts screaming about how unfair this is, how they're trying to undermine you. And before you know it, you're defending yourself with an edge in your voice that makes everyone uncomfortable. In that moment, you've lost. Not just the argument, but credibility, respect, and influence. Everyone in that room now sees you as someone who can't handle pressure, someone who lets emotions cloud their judgment, someone who is not leadership material. This happens thousands of times throughout your life. You get triggered by your partner and say something cruel that damages trust. You feel overwhelmed by a project and procrastinate until it becomes a crisis. You get jealous of a colleague's success and make subtle comments that reveal your insecurity. You feel imposter syndrome and stay quiet when you should speak up, missing opportunities to advance your career. Each time you react emotionally, instead of responding strategically, you're training the world to see you as unreliable, unstable, and unworthy of greater responsibility. But the external costs are nothing compared to the internal damage. When you're controlled by your emotions, you become a victim of your own mind. You wake up each day not knowing if it will be a good day or a bad day, because that depends entirely on what happens to you and how you feel about it. Your self-worth fluctuates based on other people's opinions. Your confidence depends on external validation. Your peace of mind is hostage to circumstances you cannot control. You live in a constant state of emotional reactivity, never knowing when the next trigger will send you spiraling into anger, anxiety, or despair. This is no way to live. This is not freedom. This is emotional slavery, and it's time to break free. The people who control their emotions have a massive advantage in every area of life. They get promoted faster because they handle pressure better. They have stronger relationships because they don't say things they regret. They achieve their goals because they don't quit when things get emotionally difficult. They live with a deep sense of inner peace because their happiness doesn't depend on external circumstances. This is not a natural talent that some people are born with. This is a skill that can be learned, and in the next chapters, you're going to learn exactly how to master it. Chapter 2. why your brain is lying to you about emotions. To understand how to control your emotions, you need to understand what emotions actually are and why your brain creates them. Most people think emotions are mysterious forces that just happen to them, like being struck by lightning. But emotions are actually predictable biological processes that follow specific patterns, and once you understand these patterns, you can learn to influence them. Your brain's primary job is to keep you alive. Everything it does, including creating emotions, is designed to help you survive and reproduce. The problem is that your brain is still wired for a world that existed thousands of years ago, when the biggest threats were predators, starvation, and being rejected by your tribe. In that world, immediate emotional reactions were often the difference between life and death. If you saw a tiger, you needed to feel fear instantly so you would run. If someone threatened your status in the group, you needed to feel anger so you would fight back. If you were separated from your tribe, you needed to feel anxiety so you would work to reconnect. These emotional reactions were adaptive because they helped our ancestors survive. But in today's world, these same emotional reactions are maladaptive. There are no tigers, but your brain still treats a critical email from your boss like a life or death threat. Social rejection no longer means death, but your brain still floods your system with stress hormones when someone doesn't text you back. Uncertainty no longer means starvation, but your brain still creates anxiety when you don't know what's going to happen next. Your brain is giving you emotional reactions designed for physical dangers to deal with psychological challenges, and this mismatch is causing massive problems in your life. Here's how it works. When something happens that your brain interprets as threatening, it triggers your amygdala, the alarm center of your brain. Your amygdala doesn't think or analyze, it just reacts. In milliseconds, it floods your system with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, preparing your body for fight, flight, or freeze. This happens faster than your conscious mind can process, which is why you often feel angry or afraid before you even understand why. These stress hormones then hijack your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logical thinking, decision-making, and emotional regulation. This is why you can't think clearly when you're emotionally activated. This is why you say and do things you regret when you're angry. This is why you make terrible decisions when you're afraid or anxious. Your thinking brain has been temporarily knocked offline by your emotional brain. But here's what most people don't understand. This emotional hijacking only lasts about 6 minutes if you don't feed it with your thoughts. The stress hormones naturally metabolize out of your system, and your prefrontal cortex comes back online. The problem is that most people don't wait 6 minutes. They start thinking about what happened, creating stories about why it's terrible, imagining all the ways it could get worse, and recreating the emotional reaction over and over again. They turn a 6-minute biological process into hours, days, or even years of emotional suffering. The key to emotional control is understanding that you have a choice. You cannot control the initial emotional reaction, that's automatic. But you can control what you do with that emotion once you recognize it's there. You can choose to feed it with dramatic thoughts that intensify it, or you can choose to observe it calmly until it naturally subsides. This choice is where your power lies. When you understand that emotions are temporary biological events, not permanent truths about your situation, you become free to respond to life from wisdom instead of reactivity. Chapter 3. The Emotional Control Advantage. People who have mastered emotional control have an almost unfair advantage in life. While everyone else is being pushed around by their feelings, reacting impulsively and making decisions based on temporary emotional states, emotionally controlled people remain calm, think clearly, and respond strategically. This advantage compounds over time, creating massive differences in success, happiness, and fulfillment. In business, emotional control is the difference between leadership and liability. Leaders are people who can make good decisions under pressure, handle criticism without getting defensive, and navigate conflict without losing their composure. These are all emotional control skills. When you can stay calm during a crisis, people naturally look to you for guidance. When you can receive feedback without reacting emotionally, people trust you with more responsibility. When you can disagree with someone without getting angry, People respect your professionalism and want to work with you. I've seen brilliant people plateau in their careers because they couldn't control their emotions. They would get triggered in meetings, react defensively to feedback, or let stress affect their performance. Meanwhile, less talented people with better emotional control got promoted because they were seen as more reliable and mature. In relationships, emotional control is what separates lasting love from constant drama. When you don't take your partner's bad moods personally, when you can discuss problems without getting triggered, when you can apologize without your ego getting in the way, you create the safety and trust that deep intimacy requires. Most relationships fail not because people don't love each other, but because they don't know how to handle the inevitable conflicts and triggers that come up. They let emotions hijack their interactions, saying hurtful things they don't mean, creating resentment that builds over time. But when both partners have emotional control, they can navigate any challenge while growing closer rather than growing apart. In parenting, emotional control is what allows you to guide your children from wisdom instead of reactivity. Kids will test boundaries, act out, and push your buttons. If you react emotionally every time, you're teaching them that emotions are in control, that big feelings justify poor behavior. But when you stay calm and respond thoughtfully, you model the emotional regulation skills they need to develop. You show them what strength looks like. For your own well-being, emotional control is the foundation of mental health and life satisfaction. When you're not at the mercy of your emotions, you can pursue long-term goals without being derailed by temporary setbacks. You can handle stress without becoming overwhelmed. You can face challenges with confidence instead of anxiety. You can experience difficult emotions without being consumed by them. Most people live on an emotional roller coaster, feeling great when things go well and terrible when they don't. Their happiness depends entirely on external circumstances, which means they're never really in control of their own lives. But when you master emotional control, you develop what psychologists call emotional resilience. You maintain your equilibrium, regardless of what happens around you. This doesn't mean you become emotionless or indifferent. You still feel everything deeply, you just don't let those feelings control your behavior. You become like a mountain in a storm, solid and unshakable no matter how hard the wind blows. The most successful people in every field have this quality. Athletes who perform their best under pressure, entrepreneurs who make clear decisions during crises, artists who create their best work while dealing with personal struggles. They all have the ability to feel their emotions fully while choosing their responses wisely. This is not a natural talent that some people are born with. This is a skill that can be developed through understanding and practice. Every technique you're about to learn has been proven by neuroscience research and tested by thousands of people who have transformed their lives by taking control of their emotional responses. Chapter 4. The personalization trap that makes everything worse. Most people are trapped in a destructive mental pattern that amplifies their emotional reactions and makes every situation feel more threatening than it actually is. I call this the personalization trap, and it's the single biggest obstacle to emotional control. Here's how it works. Something happens that you don't like. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your boss gives you critical feedback. Your friend doesn't return your text, or your partner seems distant. Instead of seeing these as neutral events with multiple possible explanations, you immediately make it about you. You assume their behavior is a direct reflection of how they feel about you, what they think of your worth, or what they're trying to communicate to you. This personalization creates a cascade of emotional reactions. The person who cut you off wasn't just in a hurry, they disrespected you. Your boss didn't just give feedback, they attacked your competence. Your friend didn't just get busy, they don't value your relationship. Your partner isn't just tired, they're pulling away from you. Each of these interpretations triggers your threat detection system, flooding your body with stress hormones and creating emotional reactions that are completely disproportionate to what actually happened. But here's the truth that will set you free. Most of what people do has nothing to do with you. That person who cut you off is dealing with their own stress, running late for their own important meeting, worried about their own problems. Your boss is under pressure from their boss, dealing with budget constraints, trying to improve team performance across the board. Your friend is overwhelmed with work, dealing with family issues, or simply forgot to respond because they have their own busy life. Your partner is tired from their own challenging day, processing their own emotions, or thinking about their own concerns. Human beings are fundamentally self-centered, not in a malicious way, but in a natural way. Everyone is primarily focused on their own experiences, their own challenges, their own goals and fears. Most of the time, when someone's behavior affects you negatively, it's not because they're thinking about you at all. They're just living their own life, dealing with their own stuff, making decisions based on their own priorities and pressures. When you understand this, you become emotionally free. Instead of taking everything personally, you start seeing people's behavior as information about their internal state, not their opinion of you. When someone is rude, you think, they must be having a difficult day, instead of, they don't respect me. When someone doesn't respond quickly, you think, they must be busy, instead of, they don't care about me. When someone gives you critical feedback, you think, they want to help improve the situation, instead of, they think I'm incompetent. This shift in perspective doesn't just reduce your emotional reactions, it actually makes you more effective in dealing with people. When you're not defensive, you can listen to feedback and extract useful information. When you're not taking things personally, you can respond to people's actual needs instead of your hurt feelings. When you're not making assumptions about their intentions, you can ask clarifying questions and solve problems more effectively. The personalization trap also makes you less empathetic and understanding. When you assume everything is about you, you stop considering what other people might be going through. You become so focused on your own hurt feelings that you can't see their struggles, their pressures, their fears. But when you remember that everyone is fighting their own battles, dealing with their own challenges, you naturally become more patient and compassionate. This doesn't mean you should accept genuinely disrespectful or harmful behavior. Some people do act with malicious intent. Some situations are legitimately about you. But these cases are much rarer than most people think. The vast majority of negative interactions are simply the result of stressed, busy, distracted people trying to navigate their own complex lives. Chapter 5. The expectation prison that guarantees disappointment. Most people live in what I call the expectation prison. They have detailed ideas about how other people should behave, how situations should unfold, and how life should treat them. When reality doesn't match these expectations, they become angry, frustrated, or disappointed. They spend their lives fighting against what is, demanding that the world conform to their internal rulebook. This approach guarantees emotional suffering because the world doesn't care about your expectations. People will behave according to their own personalities, motivations, and circumstances, not according to your preferences. Situations will unfold based on countless variables you cannot control, not according to your plans. Life will present you with challenges, setbacks, and surprises regardless of how you think things should go. Every expectation you hold is a future disappointment waiting to happen. When you expect your partner to always be in a good mood, you'll get triggered when they're stressed or tired. When you expect your colleagues to always be professional and considerate, you'll get frustrated when they're rude or selfish. When you expect traffic to be light, elevators to work properly, and technology to function perfectly, you'll be constantly annoyed by the normal inconveniences of daily life. The antidote to the expectation prison is acceptance. Not passive resignation, but active acceptance of reality as it is, not as you wish it were. Acceptance means acknowledging that people are flawed, situations are unpredictable, and life includes both positive and negative experiences. This doesn't mean you stop trying to influence outcomes or improve situations. It means you stop demanding that reality be different than it is. You work with what exists instead of fighting against it. When you practice acceptance, you make space for people to be human. You allow them to have bad days, make mistakes, and act according to their own priorities without taking it as a personal offense. You expect that plans will sometimes change, that people will sometimes disappoint you, and that challenges will arise. This expectation of imperfection paradoxically makes life much more pleasant because you're not constantly surprised and angered by normal human behavior. Acceptance also frees you to focus your energy on what you can actually control. Instead of wasting emotional energy trying to change other people or demanding that situations be different, you focus on your own responses, your own choices, your own growth. This is where your real power lies. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond to what happens to you. The most emotionally controlled people have mastered this principle. They don't waste time being angry about traffic, frustrated with other people's personalities, or disappointed by life's inevitable challenges. They accept these things as part of the human experience and focus their energy on responding effectively. This acceptance doesn't make them passive or powerless. It makes them incredibly powerful because all their energy goes toward actions that can actually make a difference. When you release yourself from the expectation prison, you discover a profound sense of peace. You stop fighting reality and start working with it. You become like water, adapting to whatever container you find yourself in while maintaining your essential nature. You find joy in unexpected moments, opportunity in challenges, and strength in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. Chapter 6. The Emotional Regulation Hierarchy. Not all emotions are created equal. Some emotions are helpful messengers that provide valuable information about your situation. Others are destructive forces that cloud your judgment and lead to poor decisions. Learning to distinguish between these different types of emotions is crucial for developing emotional control. At the bottom of the hierarchy are what I call surface emotions. These are usually reactions to other emotions, interpretations of situations, or responses to thoughts rather than direct responses to reality. Anger is often a surface emotion covering deeper feelings like hurt, fear, or disappointment. Jealousy is typically a surface emotion covering insecurity or fear of loss. Resentment is a surface emotion covering unprocessed hurt or unmet needs. These surface emotions are rarely helpful because they're not giving you accurate information about what's actually happening. They're showing you your interpretation of events, your stories about what those events mean, your judgments about whether things are fair or unfair. When you react based on surface emotions, you're responding to your thoughts about the situation rather than the situation itself. In the middle of the hierarchy are primary emotions. These are direct, immediate responses to what's happening in your environment. Fear that alerts you to genuine danger, sadness that signals loss or disappointment, joy that indicates something positive has occurred. These emotions provide useful information, but they need to be processed through your rational mind before you act on them. Fear might be telling you about a real threat that requires caution, or it might be triggered by something that reminds you of past trauma but isn't actually dangerous. Sadness might be a healthy response to loss that needs to be honored, or it might be triggered by perfectionist expectations that aren't realistic. Joy might indicate genuine appreciation for something wonderful, or it might be the result of comparison thinking that makes you feel superior to others. At the top of the hierarchy are what I call wisdom emotions. These are emotional states that arise from clear thinking, accurate perception, and aligned values. Compassion for others who are struggling, gratitude for positive aspects of your life, determination to pursue meaningful goals, peace from accepting what you cannot control. These emotions are reliable guides for action because they come from wisdom rather than reactivity. They help you respond to situations in ways that align with your long-term values and goals rather than your immediate impulses. The key to emotional control is learning to pause when you feel any emotion and ask yourself, where is this coming from? Is this a surface emotion covering something deeper? Is this a primary emotion giving me useful information? Or is this a wisdom emotion guiding me toward aligned action? This process of emotional discernment takes practice, but it's one of the most powerful tools you can develop. When you can accurately identify what type of emotion you're experiencing, you can respond appropriately instead of being hijacked by feelings that may not be serving you. For surface emotions, the best response is usually to pause and look deeper. What is the anger really about? What is the jealousy trying to protect? What unmet need is driving the resentment? Once you identify the underlying issue, you can address it directly instead of acting out the surface emotion. For primary emotions, the best response is to gather information. What is this fear telling me about my situation? What is this sadness helping me process? What is this excitement encouraging me to pursue? Use the emotion as data while making decisions based on careful thinking rather than emotional impulse. For wisdom emotions, the best response is usually to follow their guidance. Compassion rarely leads you astray. Genuine gratitude enhances your well-being. Determination based on clear values moves you toward meaningful goals. These emotions can be trusted because they arise from your highest self rather than your reactive patterns. Chapter 7. The 6-second rule that changes everything. Here's a scientific fact that will revolutionize how you handle emotions. Any emotion, no matter how intense, only lasts about 6 seconds if you don't feed it with your thoughts. The stress hormones that create emotional reactions are metabolized out of your bloodstream in approximately 6 seconds. After that, any continued emotional distress is being created by your thoughts about the situation, not the situation itself. This means that every time you stay angry for hours, anxious for days, or depressed for weeks, you're not responding to what happened. You're responding to your thoughts about what happened. You're creating new stress hormones by repeatedly thinking about the triggering event, imagining worst-case scenarios, rehearsing arguments, or telling yourself stories about how terrible everything is. The 6-second rule gives you incredible power. It means that no external event can actually control your emotional state for more than 6 seconds unless you allow it to. Everything beyond those first 6 seconds is your choice. You can choose to keep recreating the emotional reaction by feeding it with thoughts, or you can choose to let it pass naturally and respond from a place of calm clarity. Here's how to apply the 6-second rule in real situations. When something triggers you, notice the physical sensation of the emotion. Feel the heat in your face, the tension in your shoulders, the quickening of your heartbeat. Don't try to stop these sensations, just observe them like a scientist studying an interesting phenomenon. This observation alone starts to create space between you and the emotion. Instead of being completely consumed by the feeling, part of you is watching the feeling. This watching part is your conscious awareness, and it's not emotional. It's calm, observant, and wise. The more you strengthen this observing capacity, the less power emotions have over you. While you're observing the physical sensations, breathe slowly and deeply. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which naturally calms your body's stress response. Count your breaths if it helps you stay present. In for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, out for 6 counts. This gives your prefrontal cortex time to come back online so you can think clearly about how to respond. Most importantly, do not engage with the thoughts that arise during these 6 seconds. Your mind will immediately start creating stories about what happened, why it's terrible, what it means about you or the other person, what you should do in response. These thoughts are not facts. They're just your brain's attempt to make sense of the emotional activation. If you engage with these thoughts, if you start agreeing with them or arguing with them, you'll recreate the emotional reaction and reset the 6-second timer. Instead, treat these thoughts like clouds passing through the sky. Notice them, but don't grab onto them. Let them flow through your awareness without resistance or engagement. After 6 seconds of this process, you'll find that the emotional intensity has significantly decreased. You're no longer in fight or flight mode. Your thinking brain is back online. Now you can choose how to respond based on wisdom rather than reactivity. You can consider the situation objectively, think about your long-term goals, and decide on the most effective course of action. The 6-second rule becomes easier with practice. At first, you might not catch yourself until you've been emotionally activated for minutes or even hours. That's normal. The key is to apply the rule whenever you remember it. Even if you've been angry for an hour, you can still stop feeding it with thoughts and let it naturally subside. The emotion will pass, and you'll be able to think clearly again. Eventually, you'll become so good at this that you can catch yourself within the first few seconds of emotional activation. You'll feel the initial surge of anger, fear, or hurt. Observe it calmly, breathe through it, and respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. This skill alone will transform every area of your life because it gives you the space to choose your responses instead of being controlled by your automatic reactions. Chapter 8. The Reframing Revolution. Your emotional reactions are not caused by what happens to you, they're caused by what you think about what happens to you. This is one of the most important truths in all of psychology, and understanding it gives you enormous power to control your emotional state. The same event can trigger completely different emotional reactions depending on how you interpret it. If someone doesn't return your text message, you could think, they must be busy and feel neutral, or you could think, they're ignoring me and feel hurt. If you get critical feedback at work, you could think, this will help me improve and feel motivated, or you could think, they think I'm incompetent and feel defensive. If your plans get cancelled, you could think, now I have unexpected free time and feel pleased, or you could think, this ruins everything and feel frustrated. The event is the same, but your interpretation creates entirely different emotional experiences. This is where reframing comes in. Reframing is the practice of consciously choosing more accurate, more helpful, or more empowering interpretations of events. Instead of accepting your first automatic thought about a situation, you question it. You look for alternative explanations. You ask yourself what else this could mean, what other factors might be involved, what would be a more useful way to think about this. Here are the most powerful reframing techniques that will revolutionize your emotional life. The neutral reframe. Instead of automatically assigning positive or negative meaning to events, you practice seeing them as neutral until you have more information. Someone seems upset with you. Instead of assuming you did something wrong, you recognize that you don't actually know why they seem upset. There could be dozens of explanations that have nothing to do with you. This reframe prevents you from creating unnecessary emotional drama while you gather more information about what's actually happening. The opportunity reframe. Instead of seeing challenges as problems, you look for the opportunities they contain. You get laid off from your job. Instead of seeing it as a disaster, you could see it as an opportunity to find work that's more aligned with your values. You have a conflict with someone? Instead of seeing it as a relationship threat, you could see it as an opportunity to communicate more clearly and understand each other better. This reframe doesn't minimize real difficulties, but it helps you focus on possibilities rather than limitations. The learning reframe. Instead of seeing mistakes and failures as evidence of your inadequacy, you see them as valuable information that helps you improve. You gave a presentation that didn't go well? Instead of feeling like a failure, you focus on what you learned about public speaking and how you can do better next time. You made a poor decision in your relationship? Instead of beating yourself up, you think about what this taught you about your patterns and how you can choose differently in the future. This reframe turns every experience into education. The temporary reframe. Instead of seeing current difficulties as permanent features of your life, you remember that everything is temporary. You're going through a stressful period at work? This too shall pass. You're dealing with a health challenge? Your body is working to heal, and this situation will evolve. You're experiencing relationship problems, people grow and change, and relationships can improve. This reframe gives you hope and prevents you from catastrophizing temporary situations. The growth reframe. Instead of seeing difficulties as punishments or bad luck, you see them as opportunities to develop strength, resilience, and wisdom. Every challenge you face is making you stronger and wiser. Every problem you solve increases your capacity to handle future problems. Every obstacle you overcome builds your confidence in your ability to handle whatever life brings you. This reframe helps you embrace challenges instead of avoiding them. The compassion reframe. Instead of judging yourself or others harshly for mistakes and imperfections, you remember that everyone is doing their best with their current level of awareness and resources. When you make a mistake, instead of harsh self-criticism, you offer yourself the same compassion you would give a good friend. When others behave poorly, instead of anger, you remember that hurt people, and everyone is struggling with their own challenges. This reframe reduces anger and increases understanding. The key to effective reframing is practice. Your brain has spent years developing automatic interpretations of events, and it will take time to develop new patterns. But every time you catch yourself in a negative interpretation and consciously choose a more helpful one, you're literally rewiring your brain to default to more positive perspectives. Chapter 9. The Emotional Labeling Technique. Most people have the emotional vocabulary of a 5-year-old. They know they feel good or bad, happy or sad, but they can't distinguish between disappointment and frustration, between anxiety and excitement, between hurt and anger. This lack of precision makes emotional control much more difficult because you can't manage what you can't clearly identify. Emotional labeling is the practice of becoming extremely specific about what you're feeling. Instead of just knowing that you feel bad, you identify whether you're feeling disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, hurt, angry, lonely, or something else entirely. This precision activates your prefrontal cortex and reduces activity in your amygdala, literally changing your brain state in ways that make emotions less overwhelming and more manageable. Research shows that people who practice emotional labeling have better emotional regulation, lower stress levels, and improved decision-making abilities. Here's how the technique works. When you notice an emotional reaction, pause and ask yourself, what specifically am I feeling right now? Don't settle for general categories like bad or upset. Get as precise as possible. Am I feeling frustrated that things aren't going according to plan? Disappointed that my expectations weren't met? Anxious about an uncertain outcome? Hurt that someone didn't consider my feelings? Angry that a boundary was violated? Overwhelmed by too many demands? Lonely because I feel disconnected? The more specific you can be, the more control you'll have over your internal state. Different emotions require different responses. If you're feeling frustrated, you might need to adjust your expectations or your approach. If you're feeling hurt, you might need to communicate about your needs or practice self-compassion. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you might need to prioritize and delegate. If you're feeling lonely, you might need to reach out for connection. But you can't choose the right response if you don't know exactly what you're dealing with. Emotional labeling also helps you understand the difference between emotions and thoughts. Many times what you think is an emotion is actually a judgment or an interpretation. I feel like she doesn't respect me is not an emotion, it's a thought. The emotion might be hurt, disappointment, or anger. I feel like this is impossible is not an emotion, it's a catastrophic thought. The emotion might be overwhelmed, frustrated, or discouraged. When you separate the emotion from the story you're telling yourself about the situation, you can deal with each one appropriately. You can observe the emotion with compassion while questioning whether the story is accurate or helpful. Here's a practical exercise to develop your emotional labeling skills. Several times a day, stop whatever you're doing and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Try to identify at least 3 different emotions that are present. Most emotional states are actually combinations of multiple feelings. You might be excited about a new opportunity and nervous about whether you can handle it. You might be grateful for someone's help and slightly embarrassed that you needed it. You might be proud of an accomplishment and worried about whether you can maintain this level of success. The more precisely you can map your internal emotional landscape, the more skillfully you can navigate it. You'll know which emotions to honor, which ones to question, and which ones to use as motivation for action. Instead of being overwhelmed by a confusing mix of feelings, you'll have clarity about what you're experiencing and why. Advanced emotional labeling involves understanding the layers of emotions. Often, the emotion you're most aware of is covering up deeper feelings. Anger often covers hurt, fear, or disappointment. Anxiety often covers excitement or anticipation. Sadness sometimes covers relief or acceptance. Depression often covers unexpressed anger or grief. When you can identify these underlying emotions, you can address what's really going on instead of just dealing with the surface reaction. Chapter 10. The Breathing Bridge to Emotional Freedom. Your breath is the bridge between your conscious and unconscious mind, between your emotional reactions and your rational responses. Most people breathe in ways that increase emotional reactivity. They take shallow breaths high in their chest, especially when stressed or triggered. This type of breathing keeps your nervous system in a state of activation, making it harder to think clearly and easier to be overwhelmed by emotions. But when you learn to breathe in ways that activate your parasympathetic nervous system, you can literally calm yourself down within minutes. Proper breathing is the fastest and most reliable way to shift from emotional reactivity to emotional control. Here's why breathing is so powerful for emotional regulation. Your breath directly affects your heart rate variability, which influences your nervous system state. Slow, deep breathing activates the vagus nerve, which sends signals to your brain that it's safe to relax. This reduces stress hormone production and increases the production of calming neurotransmitters. Within just a few minutes of conscious breathing, you can shift from fight or flight mode to rest and digest mode, making it much easier to think clearly and respond wisely. The most effective breathing technique for emotional control is what I call the 4-7-8 pattern. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 7, then exhale through your mouth for a count of 8. This pattern is particularly powerful because the extended exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system more strongly than other breathing patterns. Repeat this cycle 4 to 8 times whenever you feel emotionally activated. Here's how to use breathing for emotional control in real situations. The moment you notice emotional activation, whether it's anger, anxiety, hurt, or any other intense feeling, immediately shift your attention to your breath. Don't try to change the emotion or fight it. Instead, use your breath as an anchor for your attention. This gives your conscious mind something to focus on, other than the triggering thoughts that are feeding the emotional reaction. Start with simple awareness, breathing. Just notice your breath as it naturally flows in and out. Count each exhale from 1 to 10, then start over at 1. If you lose count because your mind wanders to the triggering situation, that's normal. Just gently bring your attention back to your breath and start counting again at 1. This practice alone will begin to calm your nervous system and create space between you and your emotions. Once you've established some basic calm through awareness breathing, you can move to the 4-7-8 pattern or other calming breath techniques. The key is to breathe slowly, deeply, and with intention. Make your exhales longer than your inhales. This tells your nervous system that you're safe and can afford to relax. For severe emotional activation, you can combine breathing with progressive muscle relaxation. As you breathe in, tense all the muscles in your body. Hold your breath and the tension for a few seconds, then exhale while releasing all the tension at once. This helps discharge the physical energy that builds up during emotional reactions and creates a profound sense of relaxation. The beauty of using breath for emotional control is that it's always available to you. You don't need any special equipment or ideal conditions. You can use breathing techniques in the middle of a difficult conversation, during a stressful meeting, while stuck in traffic, or anywhere else you need to regain your composure. With practice, conscious breathing becomes automatic. You'll find yourself naturally shifting to deeper, slower breaths whenever stress begins to build. This creates a buffer between you and your emotional reactions, giving you the space to choose your responses instead of being controlled by your impulses. Chapter 11. The Detachment System for Emotional Independence. The ultimate goal of emotional control is not just to manage your reactions in difficult moments, but to develop such deep emotional independence that your inner state remains stable regardless of what happens around you. This is what I call emotional detachment, and it's the hallmark of truly emotionally evolved people. Emotional detachment does not mean becoming cold, uncaring, or disconnected from life. It means developing the ability to care deeply while holding lightly. It means being fully engaged in your relationships and goals while not being emotionally dependent on specific outcomes. It means maintaining your inner equilibrium whether things go your way or not. Most people are emotionally dependent. Their mood depends on how others treat them. Their self-esteem depends on external validation. Their sense of security depends on controlling circumstances that are largely outside their control. This emotional dependency makes them vulnerable to constant ups and downs, never really feeling stable or at peace. Emotionally detached people, by contrast, have developed such a strong sense of inner security that they don't need specific outcomes to feel okay. They can pursue goals passionately without being attached to the results. They can love deeply without being possessive. They can give their best effort without being devastated if things don't work out as planned. This detachment gives them enormous power because they're not easily manipulated, triggered, or thrown off balance by external events. The first principle of emotional detachment is understanding that your worth is not determined by what happens to you. You are valuable because you exist, not because of your achievements, other people's opinions, or your circumstances. When you truly internalize this truth, you become immune to the emotional manipulation that occurs when people try to make you feel guilty, inadequate, or afraid. You can receive criticism without feeling worthless, face rejection without feeling unlovable, and encounter failure without feeling like a failure. The second principle is accepting that you cannot control most of what happens in life. You cannot control other people's choices, their moods, their reactions, or their decisions about you. You cannot control the economy, the weather, natural disasters, or countless other factors that affect your life. The only things you can truly control are your own thoughts, emotions, choices, and actions. When you focus all your energy on what you can control, instead of trying to influence what you cannot, you become incredibly powerful within your sphere of influence, while remaining peaceful about everything else. The third principle is understanding that nothing lasts forever. Every situation, emotion, and circumstance is temporary. Success is temporary, failure is temporary, pain is temporary, pleasure is temporary. When you deeply understand impermanence, you don't get too high during good times or too low during difficult times. You learn to appreciate positive experiences without clinging to them and endure negative experiences without being overwhelmed by them. To develop emotional detachment, practice the observer meditation. Several times a day, step back mentally and observe your thoughts and emotions as if you were watching them from outside yourself. Notice what you're thinking without getting caught up in the content of the thoughts. Notice what you're feeling without being consumed by the emotions. This practice helps you realize that you are not your thoughts or emotions. You are the awareness that observes them. This awareness is always calm, always present, and always in control. Another powerful detachment practice is the worst-case scenario exercise. When you're anxious about a particular outcome, imagine the worst thing that could realistically happen, and then ask yourself, would I survive this? Could I handle it? What would I do next? Most of the time, you'll realize that even the worst-case scenario is manageable. This removes the emotional charge from your fears and helps you approach situations with confidence instead of anxiety. Practice loving without attachment by caring about people's happiness while accepting that their choices are their own. Support their growth while recognizing that they may choose differently than you would prefer. Enjoy their presence while knowing that relationships change and evolve. This allows you to love more freely because you're not constantly worried about losing what you have. Chapter 12. The Anger Antidote that transforms rage into power. Anger is the emotion that does the most damage to relationships, careers, and personal well-being. When you're angry, you say things you don't mean, make decisions you regret, and damage trust with people who matter to you. But what most people don't understand is that anger is almost never the real emotion you're feeling. It's a secondary emotion that covers up more vulnerable feelings like hurt, fear, disappointment, or powerlessness. When you learn to identify what's underneath your anger, you can address the real issue instead of acting out the surface emotion. This transforms potentially destructive situations into opportunities for deeper understanding and connection. Here's what's really happening when you get angry. Something occurs that threatens your sense of safety, fairness, or control. Maybe someone breaks a promise, treats you disrespectfully, or fails to meet your expectations. Instead of feeling the vulnerable emotions this triggers, like hurt or disappointment, your brain quickly converts them to anger because anger feels more powerful. Anger gives you energy and makes you feel like you can do something about the situation. But this conversion happens so quickly that most people don't realize the original emotion was something else entirely. To use anger as a doorway to emotional wisdom, practice the pause and dig technique. The moment you feel anger arising, pause before you react and ask yourself, what am I really feeling underneath this anger? Am I hurt that someone didn't consider my feelings? Am I scared about losing something important to me? Am I disappointed that my expectations weren't met? Am I feeling powerless in a situation where I want more control? Once you identify the underlying emotion, you can address it directly instead of acting out the anger. If you're hurt, You can communicate about what you need. If you're scared, you can take steps to increase your security. If you're disappointed, you can adjust your expectations or your approach. If you're feeling powerless, you can focus on what you can control. This process transforms anger from a destructive force into useful information about what you need to address in your life. Sometimes, anger is appropriate and useful. If someone violates your boundaries, treats you unfairly, or threatens something you value, anger can motivate you to take protective action. But even justified anger needs to be channeled constructively rather than expressed destructively. The goal is to use anger's energy to solve problems rather than create more problems. When you feel justified anger, use the assertion technique instead of the aggression reaction. Assertion means clearly communicating your boundaries, needs, or concerns without attacking the other person's character or worth. Instead of saying, "You're selfish and inconsiderate," you say, "When you cancel our plans at the last minute, I feel disappointed and unimportant." Instead of saying, "You never listen to me," you say, "I need to feel heard in this conversation. Can we slow down and make sure we're understanding each other?" Assertion addresses the behavior that triggered your anger while preserving the relationship and creating space for resolution. Aggression, by contrast, attacks the person instead of addressing the problem, which usually makes situations worse rather than better. For chronic anger issues, practice the energy transformation exercise. When you feel anger building, instead of trying to suppress it, channel that energy into physical activity. Go for a run, do push-ups, clean something vigorously, or engage in any activity that allows you to discharge the physical energy anger creates. This prevents you from saying or doing things you'll regret while using anger's energy for productive purposes. You can also transform anger energy into motivation for positive change. If you're angry about injustice, channel that passion into advocacy or volunteer work. If you're angry about a personal situation, use that energy to make necessary changes or have difficult conversations. If you're angry about your circumstances, let that fuel your determination to create a better situation. The key insight about anger is that it's always a choice. You might feel the initial flash of anger automatically, but continuing to feed it and act on it is a decision. Every moment you spend in anger is a moment you could spend solving problems, improving situations, or moving toward your goals. When you master your anger, you don't become weak or passive. You become incredibly strong because all your energy goes toward effective action instead of destructive reaction. Chapter 13. The Anxiety Alchemy That Turns Fear into Fuel. Anxiety is one of the most misunderstood emotions. Most people try to eliminate it, avoid it, or suppress it, but this approach actually makes anxiety worse. What they don't realize is that anxiety and excitement are nearly identical in terms of their physical sensations. Both involve increased heart rate, heightened alertness, and activation energy. The only difference is how you interpret these sensations. When you label them as anxiety, they feel terrible. When you label them as excitement, they feel energizing. This insight gives you enormous power to transform your relationship with anxious feelings. Instead of trying to calm yourself down when you feel anxious, you can learn to reframe the sensations as excitement about upcoming opportunities. Instead of seeing anxiety as evidence that something bad might happen, you can see it as your body preparing you to perform at your best. The first step in anxiety alchemy is understanding what anxiety is actually trying to tell you. Anxiety is your brain's way of saying, "Something important is about to happen, and I want you to be prepared." It's not predicting that something terrible will occur. It's just signaling that you care about the outcome and want to do well. When you have anxiety about a presentation, it means the presentation matters to you. When you feel anxious about a relationship conversation, it means the relationship is important to you. When you experience anxiety about a career decision, it means you want to choose wisely. Anxiety becomes problematic when you interpret it as danger instead of importance. Your brain can't tell the difference between physical threats and psychological challenges, so it responds to both with the same fight or flight activation. A job interview triggers the same physiological response as being chased by a tiger, even though one situation requires calm confidence and the other requires running for your life. To practice anxiety alchemy, use the excitement reframe. When you notice anxious sensations, immediately tell yourself, "I'm excited about this opportunity." This isn't about positive thinking or pretending you don't feel nervous. It's about accurately labeling the physical sensations you're experiencing. Your body is giving you energy to perform, not warning you about danger. When you interpret this energy as excitement, you can use it to enhance your performance instead of being overwhelmed by it. Another powerful anxiety alchemy technique is the preparation channel. Instead of trying to eliminate anxious thoughts about what might go wrong, use them as a checklist for preparation. If you're anxious about a presentation going badly, use that concern to practice more, prepare backup plans, and anticipate questions. If you're worried about a difficult conversation, use that energy to think through your key points and consider the other person's perspective. Anxiety often contains valuable information about what you need to prepare for, so use it as motivation for thorough preparation rather than evidence that you should avoid the situation. The physical sensations of anxiety can also be channeled productively through movement. When you feel anxious energy building up, engage in physical activity that matches the intensity. If you're feeling mildly anxious, try walking or gentle stretching. If you're feeling very anxious, try running, dancing, or vigorous exercise. This helps metabolize the stress hormones while maintaining the alertness and energy that can enhance your performance. For social anxiety, practice the contribution reframe. Instead of focusing on what others might think of you, focus on what you can contribute to the interaction. How can you make others feel comfortable? What value can you provide? What can you learn from the conversation? This shifts your attention from self-protection to service, which naturally reduces anxiety while making you more engaging and attractive to others. For performance anxiety, use the process focus technique. Instead of worrying about the outcome, focus completely on the process of doing your best. In a presentation, focus on clearly communicating your ideas rather than on how you'll be judged. In a competition, focus on executing your skills rather than on winning or losing. In a social situation, focus on being genuinely interested in others rather than on making a good impression. This process focus keeps you present and engaged while reducing the pressure that creates anxiety. The ultimate anxiety alchemy is understanding that anxiety often points toward your growth edge. The things that make you most nervous are often the things that would benefit you most to do. Starting that business, having that conversation, taking that risk, pursuing that opportunity. Your anxiety isn't warning you away from these things. It's highlighting their importance and encouraging you to prepare well so you can succeed. Chapter 14. The Sadness Sanctuary that honors pain without drowning in it. Sadness is the emotion that most people try to avoid, rush through, or fix as quickly as possible. Our culture teaches us to be happy all the time, to bounce back immediately from disappointments, and to see persistent sadness as a sign of weakness or mental illness. But sadness serves an important psychological function, and learning to experience it skillfully is crucial for emotional maturity and resilience. Sadness is your psyche's way of processing loss, disappointment, and change. It helps you honor what was meaningful, integrate difficult experiences, and eventually move forward with wisdom rather than just optimism. When you try to avoid or rush through sadness, you miss out on the valuable processing it provides. You also make it more likely that unresolved grief will resurface later as depression, anger, or emotional numbness. The key to healthy sadness is learning to be with it without being consumed by it. This means allowing yourself to feel the emotion fully while maintaining perspective about its temporary nature and its purpose in your emotional ecosystem. It means honoring the loss or disappointment while not losing sight of what remains good and possible in your life. To create a sadness sanctuary, first give yourself permission to feel sad without judgment. Sadness is not weakness, failure, or evidence that something is wrong with you. It's a natural response to living in a world where you care about things that can be lost, people who can leave, and dreams that sometimes don't work out. The capacity to feel sadness deeply is actually a sign of your ability to love and invest in life meaningfully. When sadness arises, Resist the urge to immediately distract yourself or cheer yourself up. Instead, create space for the emotion. This might mean setting aside time to cry, journal about what you're feeling, or simply sit quietly with the sensations of sadness. Let the emotion move through you naturally rather than trying to control it or make it go away. Practice the both and approach to sadness. You can be sad about what you've lost and grateful for what you still have. You can mourn the end of a relationship and be hopeful about future connections. You can feel disappointed about a setback and confident in your ability to overcome it. This both and thinking prevents you from getting stuck in all or nothing emotional states where sadness takes over your entire perspective. Use sadness as a teacher. Ask yourself what this emotion is helping you understand about what matters to you, what you need to let go of, or how you want to live differently moving forward. Sadness often contains important messages about your values, your attachments, and your growth opportunities. Instead of just wanting it to go away, listen to what it's trying to tell you. For deep grief, whether from loss of a relationship, death of a loved one, major life change, or shattered dreams, understand that healing happens in waves, not in a straight line. Some days you'll feel like you're making progress, and other days the sadness will feel as intense as ever. This is normal and healthy. Grief has its own timeline, and trying to rush it or follow someone else's schedule for recovery usually backfires. Create rituals and practices that honor your sadness while gently moving you toward healing. This might include writing letters to what you've lost, creating art that expresses your feelings, spending time in nature, connecting with supportive people, or engaging in activities that help you feel grounded and nurtured. These practices acknowledge the reality of your loss while gradually rebuilding your capacity for joy and engagement. The goal is not to get over sadness quickly, but to move through it thoroughly. When you allow yourself to fully experience and process sadness, it transforms from an overwhelming emotion into a source of wisdom and compassion. You develop the ability to sit with others in their pain without trying to fix them. You gain appreciation for the preciousness of what you have. You become more resilient because you know you can survive loss and disappointment. Remember that sadness is temporary, even when it feels permanent. Like all emotions, it has a natural rhythm of arising, peaking, and subsiding. Your job is not to control this rhythm, but to support yourself skillfully while it occurs. With time and proper processing, sadness gives way to acceptance, wisdom, and often a deeper appreciation for life's beauty and meaning. Chapter 15. The jealousy jujitsu that transforms comparison into inspiration. Jealousy is perhaps the most destructive emotion you can experience. It poisons relationships, destroys self-esteem, and keeps you focused on what you lack rather than what you can create. But jealousy also contains valuable information about your desires, values, and areas for growth. When you learn to decode jealousy skillfully, you can transform it from a toxic emotion into powerful motivation for positive change. Jealousy always points towards something you want. If you're jealous of someone's success, it means you want success in that area. If you're jealous of someone's relationship, it means you want a loving partnership. If you're jealous of someone's confidence, it means you want to develop more confidence yourself. Instead of being tormented by what others have that you don't, you can use jealousy as a GPS system, directing you toward your own goals and values. The first step in jealousy jujitsu is honest self-examination. When you feel jealous, ask yourself, what specifically am I envying about this person or situation? Don't just say you're jealous of their happiness or success. Get specific. Are you envious of their financial freedom, their travel opportunities, their creative expression, their relationship dynamics, their career recognition, their physical fitness, their social connections? The more precisely you can identify what triggers your jealousy, the more clearly you can see what you actually want for yourself. Next, ask yourself, what would I need to do to create something similar in my own life? This question shifts you from victim thinking to empowered thinking. Instead of feeling bad about what you don't have, you start strategizing about how to get what you want. If you're jealous of someone's business success, what would you need to learn? What risks would you need to take? What skills would you need to develop? If you're jealous of someone's relationship, What would you need to change about your own approach to dating or partnership? The goal is not necessarily to replicate someone else's exact situation, but to identify the underlying qualities or experiences you're seeking and figure out how to create them in a way that fits your own life, values, and circumstances. You might not want their exact career, but you want the sense of purpose and achievement it represents. You might not want their specific relationship, but you want the intimacy and companionship it demonstrates is possible. Use jealousy as market research. The people you envy are proof that what you want is possible. They're showing you that others have figured out how to create the things you desire. Instead of seeing them as threats or feeling inferior to them, see them as examples of what's achievable. Study their strategies, learn from their approaches, and adapt their methods to your own situation. For relationship jealousy, practice the abundance mindset. Instead of seeing love as a limited resource that gets used up when given to others, recognize that love expands when it's shared. Your partner caring about other people doesn't diminish their capacity to care about you. Your friends' other relationships don't reduce the value of your friendship. When you approach relationships from abundance rather than scarcity, jealousy naturally decreases because you're not constantly worried about losing what you have to competition. Transform competitive jealousy into collaborative inspiration. Instead of seeing other people's success as evidence of your own inadequacy, see it as evidence of what's possible in your field or area of interest. Celebrate others' achievements genuinely, knowing that their success doesn't prevent your own. In fact, surrounding yourself with successful people often accelerates your own growth because their standards and strategies rub off on you. For social media jealousy, remember that you're comparing your behind-the-scenes reality to other people's highlight reels. The vacation photos don't show the credit card debt. The relationship photos don't show the arguments. The career achievements don't show the stress and sacrifices. Everyone is dealing with challenges you can't see from the outside. Focus on creating your own meaningful experiences rather than trying to craft an image that will make others jealous of you. The ultimate jealousy jujitsu is developing such strong self-worth and life satisfaction that you genuinely celebrate others' good fortune. When you're fulfilled in your own life, other people's success feels inspiring rather than threatening. You can appreciate their achievements while being excited about your own path. This is the mark of emotional maturity, the ability to be happy for others while pursuing your own version of success and happiness. Chapter 16. The guilt liberation that frees you from emotional manipulation. Guilt is one of the most manipulative emotions, and most people carry far more of it than they need to. Healthy guilt serves a useful purpose. It signals when you've acted against your values and motivates you to make amends or change your behavior. But toxic guilt is a different beast entirely. It keeps you trapped in cycles of people-pleasing, self-criticism, and emotional manipulation by others who benefit from your guilt. Learning to distinguish between healthy and toxic guilt is essential for emotional freedom and authentic living. Healthy guilt is specific, temporary, and actionable. You feel guilty because you did something specific that violated your own values. You hurt someone's feelings, broke a promise, or acted in a way that doesn't align with who you want to be. This guilt motivates you to apologize, make amends, or change your behavior. Once you've taken appropriate action, the guilt naturally resolves because its purpose has been served. Toxic guilt, by contrast, is vague, persistent, and paralyzing. You feel guilty for existing, for having needs, for setting boundaries, for being successful, or for not being able to fix other people's problems. This guilt doesn't lead to constructive action because there's nothing specific to fix. Instead, it keeps you trapped in chronic self-criticism and compulsive people-pleasing. Toxic guilt often comes from childhood programming, where you learn to take responsibility for other people's emotions or to believe that your worth depended on making everyone else happy. Many people were raised by parents who used guilt as a control mechanism, saying things like, "After everything I've done for you," or "you're being selfish," when they set boundaries or expressed their own needs. These messages create a blueprint in your psyche that equates self-care with selfishness and personal happiness with harming others. To liberate yourself from toxic guilt, start by examining the source of your guilt feelings. Ask yourself, Am I feeling guilty because I actually did something wrong according to my own values? Or am I feeling guilty because someone else wants me to feel this way? Am I feeling guilty because I hurt someone, or because I disappointed them by not doing what they wanted? Am I feeling guilty because I acted badly, or because I acted differently than I was expected to? Practice the responsibility reality check. You are responsible for your own thoughts, emotions, choices, and actions. You are not responsible for other people's thoughts, emotions, choices, and actions. You are not responsible for making everyone happy, fixing everyone's problems, or ensuring that no one ever feels disappointed by your decisions. When someone tries to make you feel guilty for not doing what they want, they're asking you to take responsibility for their emotional management, which is not your job. Use the boundary guilt test. If you feel guilty every time you set a boundary, say no to a request, or prioritize your own needs, that guilt is probably toxic. Healthy boundaries are essential for healthy relationships and personal well-being. If setting boundaries makes you feel selfish or guilty, it usually means you learned somewhere that your needs don't matter as much as other people's needs. This belief will keep you trapped in dysfunctional relationship patterns until you challenge it. For guilt about past mistakes, practice the learning and release technique. Ask yourself, what did this experience teach me about my values, my patterns, or what I want to do differently in the future? What amends can I make, or what changes can I implement to align my future behavior with my values? Once you've learned the lesson and taken appropriate action, consciously choose to release the guilt. Continuing to punish yourself doesn't help anyone and prevents you from moving forward with wisdom. Address guilt manipulation directly when it happens. When someone says things like, "I guess I'll just do it myself," or "Fine, don't worry about me," they're trying to manipulate you through guilt. Instead of automatically giving in to make the guilt go away, respond with something like, "It sounds like you're disappointed, and I understand that. Can we talk about what you need and see if there's a solution that works for both of us?" This acknowledges their feelings without taking responsibility for managing them. The goal is not to become selfish or uncaring, but to operate from genuine compassion rather than manipulated guilt. When you're free from toxic guilt, you can help others because you want to, not because you feel obligated to. Your relationships become healthier because they're based on mutual respect rather than emotional manipulation. You become more authentic because you're living according to your own values rather than trying to avoid making anyone upset. Chapter 17. The shame shield that protects your authentic self. Shame is the most destructive emotion in the human experience. Unlike guilt, which says you did something bad, shame says you are something bad. It attacks your core sense of worth and keeps you trapped in cycles of hiding, perfectionism, and self-destruction. Most people don't distinguish between shame and guilt, but understanding the difference is crucial because they require completely different approaches to heal. Shame tells you that you're fundamentally flawed, unworthy of love, and need to hide your true self from the world. It makes you believe that if people really knew you, they would reject you. This belief creates a devastating cycle where you either hide behind masks and personas, constantly trying to be perfect, or you sabotage yourself because you don't believe you deserve good things. Shame thrives in secrecy and isolation. The more you try to hide the parts of yourself you're ashamed of, the more power shame has over you. It convinces you that you're the only one who struggles with these issues, that everyone else has it figured out, and that you're uniquely damaged or inadequate. But this is always a lie. Everyone has aspects of themselves they're not proud of. Everyone has made mistakes, felt inadequate, or struggled with difficult emotions or behaviors. The antidote to shame is vulnerability and connection. When you have the courage to share your struggles with trusted people who respond with compassion rather than judgment, shame begins to lose its power. You realize that you're not alone, that others have faced similar challenges, and that your worth as a person is not determined by your mistakes or imperfections. To build a shame shield, start by identifying your shame triggers. What thoughts about yourself make you feel like hiding? What past experiences do you work hard not to think about? What aspects of your personality, history, or current struggles do you hope no one discovers? These areas of shame are where your emotional healing work needs to focus. Practice the humanity reminder. Shame makes you feel like you're the only one who has ever struggled with these issues, but this is never true. Whatever you're ashamed of, millions of other people have experienced something similar. Whatever mistakes you've made, others have made them too. Whatever you're struggling with, you're not alone. This doesn't minimize your pain or absolve you of responsibility for your actions, but it does remind you that being imperfect is part of being human. Develop a shame-resilient inner voice. When shame starts telling you that you're bad, wrong, or unworthy, consciously choose to speak to yourself with the same compassion you would offer a good friend facing similar struggles. Instead of, "I'm such an idiot," try, "I made a mistake, and I can learn from this." Instead of, "I'm fundamentally broken," try, "I'm going through a difficult time, and I deserve support." Instead of, "No one could love me if they really knew me," try, "My worth as a person isn't determined by my struggles or imperfections." Create a supportive shame-healing community. This might include a therapist, support group, trusted friends, or family members who can listen to your struggles without judgment. The key is finding people who can offer compassion without trying to fix you, minimize your pain, or rush you through the healing process. When you can share your shame stories in environments of safety and acceptance, they begin to lose their power to control your life. Practice radical self-acceptance. This doesn't mean being satisfied with everything about yourself or giving up on growth and improvement. It means accepting that you are worthy of love and belonging exactly as you are right now, struggles and all. It means recognizing that your value as a person is inherent, not earned through performance or perfection. Challenge shame-based thinking patterns. Shame often speaks in absolutes. "I always mess up. I never do anything right. Everyone else is better than me." These extreme statements are rarely accurate and always unhelpful. Practice thinking in more nuanced ways. "I made a mistake in this situation, and I can learn from it. I'm struggling with this particular challenge, and that's okay. I have both strengths and areas for growth, just like everyone else." Remember that healing from shame is a process, not an event. You can't think your way out of shame or heal it overnight through positive thinking. It requires patience, self-compassion, and often professional support to untangle the deep beliefs that shame creates. But every step you take towards self-acceptance and vulnerability makes you stronger and freer. When you heal your shame, you don't just feel better about yourself. You also become capable of deeper connections with others because you're no longer hiding behind protective masks. You become more creative and innovative because you're not paralyzed by fear of making mistakes. You become more resilient because your self-worth doesn't depend on external validation or perfect performance. Chapter 18. The frustration formula that turns obstacles into opportunities. Frustration is anger's cousin, arising when things don't go according to your plans or when progress feels slower than you want it to be. Most people see frustration as purely negative, something to be eliminated or avoided. But frustration actually contains valuable information about your goals, your expectations, and your problem-solving opportunities. When you learn to decode frustration skillfully, it becomes a powerful ally in creating the changes you want to see in your life. Frustration typically arises from one of three sources: unrealistic timelines, ineffective strategies, or unchangeable circumstances you're trying to control. Understanding which type of frustration you're experiencing helps you respond appropriately instead of just spinning your wheels in emotional reactivity. Timeline frustration happens when you expect results faster than they realistically can occur. You want to lose weight, build a business, improve a relationship, or develop a skill, and you become frustrated when progress is slower than you hoped. This type of frustration is resolved by adjusting your expectations to match reality. Most meaningful changes take longer than we initially estimate, and accepting this timeline reality allows you to enjoy the process instead of being constantly disappointed by the pace. Strategy frustration occurs when you're working hard but not getting the results you want because your approach isn't effective. You might be trying to communicate with someone in a way that doesn't work for them, attempting to solve a problem with tools that aren't designed for that type of challenge, or pursuing a goal through methods that aren't aligned with how change actually happens. This frustration is resolved by changing your strategy rather than just trying harder with the same ineffective approach. Control frustration arises when you're trying to change things that are outside your sphere of influence. You're frustrated with other people's choices, disappointed by circumstances you cannot control, or upset about past events that cannot be changed. This frustration is resolved by redirecting your energy toward what you actually can influence while accepting what you cannot. To transform frustration into opportunity, practice the pause and analyze technique. When you notice frustration building, stop and ask yourself, what specifically is not going the way I wanted? What am I trying to control or change? What timeline was I expecting? What strategy am I using? This analysis helps you understand whether you need to adjust your expectations, change your approach, or redirect your focus. For timeline frustration, practice process-focused goal setting. Instead of only focusing on end results, create goals around the daily or weekly actions you'll take. Instead of being frustrated that you haven't achieved the outcome yet, celebrate that you're consistently doing the work required for that outcome. This keeps you motivated and engaged even when results take longer than expected. For strategy frustration, embrace experimental thinking. Instead of seeing failed approaches as evidence that your goal is impossible, see them as data about what doesn't work. Each ineffective strategy eliminates one path and gives you information about what to try next. Ask yourself, what did this approach teach me? What would I do differently? What other strategies could I explore? This turns frustration into curiosity and problem-solving energy. For control frustration, practice the sphere of influence exercise. Draw 3 circles, a small circle representing what you can directly control, your thoughts, emotions, choices, actions, a medium circle representing what you can influence, your relationships, your environment, some outcomes through your efforts, and a large circle representing what you cannot control, other people's choices, many external circumstances, past events, future uncertainties. When you feel frustrated, identify which circle the issue falls into and focus your energy accordingly. Use frustration as motivation fuel. The energy that frustration creates can be channeled into productive action if you direct it consciously. When you feel frustrated with a situation, ask yourself, what action can I take right now to move closer to what I want? What can I do today that would represent progress, even if it's small? How can I use this energy to fuel positive change instead of spinning in emotional reactivity? Transform frustration into innovation. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history came from people who were so frustrated with existing solutions that they created entirely new approaches. Your frustration might be pointing toward an opportunity to innovate, to find a better way, or to create something that doesn't currently exist. Instead of accepting frustration as a sign that you should give up, consider whether it might be motivation to pioneer a new path. The key insight about frustration is that it always points towards something you care about. You only get frustrated about things that matter to you. Instead of seeing frustration as evidence that you should stop caring or lower your standards, see it as confirmation that you're pursuing something meaningful. Use that caring as fuel for persistence, creativity, and strategic thinking. When you master the frustration formula, obstacles become puzzles to solve rather than reasons to quit. Chapter 19. The disappointment decoder that preserves hope while processing loss. Disappointment is one of the most common yet least understood emotions. It arises when reality doesn't match your expectations, when people don't behave as you hoped they would, or when outcomes fall short of what you were working toward. Most people try to protect themselves from disappointment by having lower expectations or by becoming cynical about what's possible. But this approach robs you of motivation, hope, and the ability to pursue meaningful goals with full engagement. The key to handling disappointment skillfully is learning to process it without letting it destroy your capacity for hope and effort. Disappointment serves an important psychological function. It helps you adjust your expectations to better match reality while maintaining your ability to pursue goals that matter to you. When you skip this processing, disappointment turns into cynicism, which kills your motivation for future efforts. When you get stuck in disappointment, it becomes depression, which steals your energy for moving forward. But when you process disappointment thoroughly, it becomes wisdom that helps you approach future situations more effectively. To decode disappointment skillfully, start by identifying what specific expectation wasn't met. Don't just say you're disappointed that things didn't work out. Get precise. Did you expect a particular timeline that didn't happen? Did you expect someone to behave differently than they did? Did you expect a certain level of recognition, support, or appreciation that you didn't receive? Did you expect your efforts to lead to specific results that didn't materialize? The more clearly you can identify the unmet expectation, the more specifically you can address it. Ask yourself whether your expectation was realistic given the circumstances. Sometimes disappointment comes from hoping for things that were unlikely to happen given the situation, the people involved, or the constraints you were working within. This doesn't mean you were wrong to hope, but it does mean you can adjust future expectations to be more aligned with reality. This prevents repeated disappointment in similar situations. Other times, your expectations were reasonable, but unexpected factors intervened. Someone changed their mind, circumstances shifted, or luck didn't go your way. In these cases, the disappointment is about processing the loss of something that could have reasonably happened but didn't. This type of disappointment requires grieving what might have been while opening yourself to new possibilities. Practice the both and approach to disappointment. You can be disappointed that things didn't work out as hoped and excited about new opportunities that this creates. You can be sad about what you lost and grateful for what you gained from the experience. You can feel let down by someone's behavior and still appreciate other aspects of your relationship with them. This both and thinking prevents disappointment from taking over your entire perspective. Use disappointment as a teacher about what matters to you. The things that disappoint you most deeply are usually connected to your core values and desires. If you're deeply disappointed about not getting a promotion, it might reveal how much professional recognition matters to you. If you're disappointed by a friend's behavior, it might show you what you value in relationships. If you're disappointed by a project's outcome, it might clarify what success means to you. This information helps you pursue goals and relationships that are more aligned with what you actually care about. Transform disappointment into refined strategy. Ask yourself what this experience taught you about how to approach similar situations differently in the future. What warning signs could you watch for? What different strategies might be more effective? What additional skills or resources would be helpful? How could you better prepare for potential obstacles? This turns disappointment from a dead end into a detour that ultimately leads to better outcomes. For recurring disappointments, examine whether you're repeatedly expecting different results from the same situations or people. If someone consistently behaves in ways that disappoint you, it might be time to accept that this is who they are and adjust your expectations accordingly. If certain strategies keep leading to disappointing results, it might be time to try completely different approaches. Insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly while expecting different outcomes. Practice hope with wisdom. Disappointment doesn't mean you should stop hoping or striving for good outcomes, but it does mean you should hold your hopes lightly, preparing for multiple possible outcomes instead of banking everything on one specific result. This allows you to pursue goals with full effort while maintaining emotional resilience if things don't work out as planned. The goal is not to eliminate disappointment from your life, but to process it in ways that preserve your capacity for future hope and effort. When you handle disappointment wisely, it becomes part of your emotional resilience rather than something that breaks you down. You develop the ability to bounce back from setbacks while learning valuable lessons that improve your future success rate. Chapter 20. The overwhelm override that creates calm in chaos. Overwhelm is the emotion of our modern age. With constant connectivity, endless options, and accelerating pace of change, most people spend significant portions of their life feeling overwhelmed by their responsibilities, choices, and the sheer amount of information they're supposed to process. Overwhelm makes you feel like everything is urgent, nothing is manageable, and you're always behind. It paralyzes decision-making and creates a constant state of stress that exhausts your nervous system. Learning to override overwhelm is essential for both effectiveness and well-being in today's world. Overwhelm typically stems from one of three sources: too many inputs, unclear priorities, or perfectionist expectations. Understanding which type of overwhelm you're experiencing helps you choose the most effective intervention instead of just trying to work harder or faster, which usually makes overwhelm worse rather than better. Input overwhelm happens when you're trying to process more information, handle more tasks, or manage more relationships than your capacity allows. This type of overwhelm is resolved through boundaries and filtering. You need to consciously limit what you allow into your attention and create systems for managing the inputs you do accept. Priority overwhelm occurs when everything feels equally important and urgent, making it impossible to know where to focus your energy. This creates a paralytic effect where you switch between tasks without making meaningful progress on anything. Priority overwhelm is resolved through ruthless prioritization and accepting that you cannot do everything at once. Perfection overwhelm arises when your standards are so high that every task feels overwhelming because it has to be done perfectly. This type of overwhelm is resolved by embracing good enough standards for most things while reserving perfectionist effort for what truly matters most. To override overwhelm, start with the brain dump technique. When you feel overwhelmed, write down everything that's on your mind. Don't organize or prioritize yet. Just get everything out of your head and onto paper or into a digital document. Include tasks, worries, ideas, commitments, and anything else that's taking up mental space. This external capture reduces the cognitive load on your working memory and gives you a clearer view of what you're actually dealing with. Next, practice the reality check assessment. Look at your brain dump list and ask yourself, how many of these things actually need to happen this week? How many are truly urgent versus just feeling urgent? How many are things I've committed to versus things I think I should do? How many are within my control versus things I'm worrying about but cannot directly influence? This assessment helps you separate real responsibilities from self-imposed pressure. Use the power of 3 prioritization. From your reality check list, identify the 3 most important things that need your attention this week. Not 5 things, not 10 things, but 3 things. Write these on a separate list and focus exclusively on them until they're complete. Only then can you move on to the next 3 priorities. This prevents you from scattering your energy across too many areas while ensuring progress on what matters most. Implement the good enough principle for everything that's not in your top 3 priorities. Give yourself permission to do most things at a good enough level rather than an exceptional level. Good enough cleaning, good enough emails, good enough meal preparation. This frees up energy and attention for the areas where excellence actually matters. For chronic overwhelm, examine your relationship with saying no. Most overwhelmed people are saying yes to too many requests, opportunities, and commitments. Every yes to something unimportant is a no to something important. Practice saying no to good opportunities so you can say yes to great opportunities. Practice saying no to other people's priorities so you can say yes to your own priorities. Create overwhelm circuit breakers. These are predetermined strategies you'll use when you notice overwhelm building. This might include taking a walk, doing breathing exercises, calling a friend who helps you gain perspective, or engaging in any activity that shifts you out of overwhelm mode. Having these strategies planned ahead of time makes them more likely to use them when you need them most. Use time blocking to create artificial constraints. When you have unlimited time to complete tasks, they expand to fill all available space, Parkinson's law. But when you give yourself specific time blocks for activities, you naturally become more focused and efficient. Block out time for your top priorities and stick to those boundaries, even if the work isn't perfect when the time is up. Remember that overwhelm is often a signal that you're trying to control too much. Focus on controlling your responses, your priorities, and your boundaries while accepting that you cannot control outcomes, other people's demands, or the pace of change in the world around you. When you master the overwhelm override, you develop what I call calm urgency, the ability to work efficiently on important things while maintaining inner peace about everything you cannot control. Chapter 21. The loneliness solution that builds authentic connection. Loneliness has become an epidemic in modern society, with studies showing that chronic loneliness has health effects equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But loneliness isn't just about being alone. Some people feel deeply lonely in crowded rooms, while others feel connected and content in solitude. Loneliness is fundamentally about the absence of authentic connection, the feeling that nobody truly knows or understands you, that you don't belong anywhere, or that you're invisible to the people around you. Understanding the root causes of loneliness is essential for developing authentic solutions that create real connection rather than just social activity. Surface-level loneliness comes from lack of social interaction. You don't have enough people in your life, you don't get out enough, or you've isolated yourself due to circumstances like moving to a new city, working from home, or going through a major life transition. This type of loneliness is resolved by increasing social opportunities and being more proactive about meeting people and maintaining relationships. Deep loneliness, however, is more complex. You might have plenty of social connections but still feel fundamentally alone because those connections lack depth, authenticity, or understanding. You're surrounded by people who know your social persona but not your inner world. You maintain relationships based on what you think people want from you, rather than who you actually are. This type of loneliness requires vulnerable authenticity to heal. To solve loneliness at its root, start by examining the quality of your current relationships. How many people in your life know about your struggles, your dreams, your fears, and your real personality? How often do you share what you're actually thinking and feeling versus just maintaining polite conversation? How much energy do you spend trying to be what you think others want versus expressing who you actually are? The answers to these questions reveal whether your loneliness is about quantity or quality of connection. Practice vulnerable sharing in small steps. Most people avoid deep connection because they're afraid of being judged, rejected, or misunderstood if they reveal their true thoughts and feelings. But connection can only happen through mutual vulnerability. Start by sharing slightly more personal thoughts and feelings than you usually would. Notice how people respond. Most of the time, vulnerability invites vulnerability, and people appreciate knowing the real you more than they appreciate your perfect facade. Become genuinely interested in others' inner worlds. Many lonely people focus so much on their own need for connection that they forget to be curious about what others are experiencing. Ask deeper questions. Instead of, "How was your day?" try, "What was the best part of your day?" or "What's been on your mind lately?" Listen to understand rather than to respond. Show genuine curiosity about people's thoughts, feelings, and experiences. This creates the kind of two-way depth that transforms surface relationships into meaningful connections. Address social anxiety that might be preventing connection. If you avoid social situations due to anxiety about being judged or not knowing what to say, you're limiting your opportunities for connection. Practice social skills gradually, starting with low-stakes interactions and building your confidence over time. Remember that most people are too focused on themselves to scrutinize you as much as you imagine they are. Focus on being interested rather than interesting, and you'll naturally become more engaging to others. Create regular opportunities for deeper connection. This might include joining groups based on shared interests or values, volunteering for causes you care about, taking classes where you'll see the same people repeatedly, or organizing regular gatherings with friends where you go beyond surface-level conversation. Consistency is key because trust and depth develop over time, not in single interactions. For those who feel lonely despite having friends, examine whether you're maintaining relationships based on who you used to be rather than who you are now. Sometimes loneliness comes from outgrowing relationships that were based on shared circumstances, habits, or life stages that no longer apply. It's okay to let some relationships evolve or end while investing in relationships that fit who you're becoming. Practice self-companionship. Before you can connect deeply with others, you need to be comfortable with yourself. Spend time alone without distracting yourself with media or activity. Get to know your own thoughts, feelings, and preferences. Enjoy your own company. People who are comfortable with themselves are naturally more attractive as companions because they're not desperately needy for others to fill their emotional voids. Remember that building authentic connections takes time and mutual effort. Don't expect deep friendships to develop overnight or to resolve all feelings of loneliness immediately. Focus on being the kind of friend you would want to have: reliable, supportive, genuine, and interested in others' well-being. The connections you build through authentic sharing and genuine care for others will be far more satisfying than relationships based on convenience or surface compatibility. Chapter 22. The stress inoculation that builds emotional immunity. Chronic stress is one of the biggest threats to both physical and emotional health, yet most people's approach to stress management is completely backwards. They try to eliminate stress from their lives, avoid stressful situations, or cope with stress through escape mechanisms like entertainment, substances, or distraction. But stress cannot be eliminated from a meaningful life. Any goal worth pursuing, any relationship worth having, any change worth making will involve some level of stress. The key is not avoiding stress but building your capacity to handle it skillfully. Think of stress inoculation like physical immunity. When you expose yourself to small amounts of manageable stress while building your recovery skills, you become more resilient to larger stresses when they inevitably arise. People who try to live stress-free lives become emotionally fragile and are easily overwhelmed when challenges occur. People who practice stress inoculation become anti-fragile, actually growing stronger through manageable difficulties. There are 3 types of stress that affect you differently and require different approaches: acute stress, chronic stress, and eustress. Acute stress is intense but temporary, like giving a presentation, having a difficult conversation, or dealing with an emergency. This type of stress is actually beneficial in small doses because it activates your performance systems and builds resilience. The key is recovering fully between acute stress events rather than letting them accumulate. Chronic stress is ongoing pressure without adequate recovery, like being in a toxic work environment, caring for someone with a serious illness, or dealing with financial insecurity for extended periods. This type of stress is dangerous to your health and requires strategic intervention to either eliminate the source or significantly improve your coping resources. Eustress is positive stress from pursuing goals you care about, learning new skills, or challenging yourself to grow. This type of stress is energizing rather than depleting when balanced properly with recovery. Learning to distinguish between these types of stress helps you respond appropriately instead of treating all stress as something to be eliminated. To practice stress inoculation, deliberately expose yourself to manageable challenges that build your stress tolerance. This might include cold showers, intense exercise, public speaking practice, difficult conversations, or any activity that takes you slightly outside your comfort zone while remaining within your coping capacity. The key is choosing the stress exposure rather than being victimized by it, and ensuring adequate recovery afterward. Develop a stress recovery toolkit. Just as athletes need recovery protocols after intense training, you need specific practices that help your nervous system return to baseline after stressful experiences. This might include breathing exercises, meditation, time in nature, physical activity, creative expression, social connection, or any activities that activate your parasympathetic nervous system and restore your energy. Build your distress tolerance through mindfulness practice. Distress tolerance is your ability to experience difficult emotions and sensations without immediately trying to escape or fix them. When you can sit with discomfort without being overwhelmed by it, you become much more resilient to life's inevitable challenges. Practice observing your stress reactions with curiosity rather than resistance, breathing through uncomfortable sensations, and reminding yourself that all emotional states are temporary. Create stress reframes that help you interpret challenges as growth opportunities rather than threats. Instead of thinking, "This is terrible and shouldn't be happening," try, "This is difficult and I can handle it." Instead of "I can't take any more stress," try, "I'm building my capacity to handle bigger challenges." Instead of "Why is this happening to me?" try, "How can I use this experience to become stronger and wiser?" These reframes don't minimize real difficulties, but help you respond from strength rather than victimhood. Use hormetic stress to your advantage. Hormesis is the phenomenon where small doses of something harmful actually make you stronger. Cold exposure, fasting, intense exercise, and psychological challenges all work on this principle. By voluntarily experiencing manageable discomfort in controlled doses, you build resilience that serves you when facing involuntary stresses. The key is moderation and recovery. Too much stress becomes destructive rather than strengthening. Practice stress compartmentalization. When you're dealing with unavoidable chronic stress in one area of your life, protect other areas from being contaminated by that stress. Don't let work problems ruin your family time. Don't let financial worries prevent you from enjoying simple pleasures. Don't let relationship difficulties destroy your sleep or self-care. This compartmentalization prevents stress from taking over your entire life and preserves resources you need for coping. Remember that your perception of stress matters more than the objective stressor. Two people can experience the same challenging situation and have completely different stress responses based on how they interpret what's happening. Practice seeing challenges as temporary, specific, and manageable rather than permanent, pervasive, and overwhelming. This cognitive shift alone can dramatically reduce the negative impact of stress on your well-being. Chapter 23. The Emotional Intelligence Upgrade That Reads Any Room. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and skillfully work with emotions in yourself and others. While IQ gets you hired, EQ gets you promoted. While technical skills help you do your job, emotional intelligence determines how well you work with others, influence outcomes, and navigate complex social situations. Most people operate with the emotional intelligence they developed as children, but this is a skill that can be dramatically improved with awareness and practice. The first component of emotional intelligence is emotional self-awareness, the ability to recognize your own emotional states as they arise and understand what triggers them. Most people live in emotional reactivity, feeling angry, sad, or anxious without understanding why these emotions are arising or what they're responding to. Developing emotional self-awareness means becoming curious about your inner world rather than being confused or overwhelmed by it. Practice the emotional check-in throughout your day. Every few hours, pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where do I feel it in my body? What triggered this emotional state? What is this emotion trying to tell me about my situation or my needs? This regular self-monitoring builds your capacity to catch emotional reactions early before they escalate into problematic behaviors. The second component is emotional self-regulation, the ability to experience emotions without being controlled by them. This is what we've been developing throughout this entire system. When you can feel angry without acting in anger, anxious without avoiding important actions, or sad without drowning in despair, you have emotional self-regulation. This gives you the space to choose responses that align with your long-term goals rather than your immediate impulses. The third component is social awareness, the ability to read the emotional states and needs of others. This involves paying attention to nonverbal cues like facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, and energy levels. It means listening not just to what people say, but how they say it and what they don't say. It requires setting aside your own agenda long enough to truly understand what others are experiencing. To develop social awareness, practice the three-layer listening technique. Layer 1 is listening to the content of what someone is saying, the actual words and information. Layer 2 is listening to the emotion behind the words, the feelings that are driving their communication. Layer 3 is listening to the need underneath the emotion, what they're really trying to accomplish or what they need from the interaction. Most people only listen at layer 1, which is why they miss so much important information about what's really happening in social situations. The fourth component is relationship management, the ability to use your understanding of emotions to influence interactions and outcomes. This involves knowing how to help others feel heard and understood, how to navigate conflicts constructively, how to motivate and inspire people, and how to build trust and rapport even in challenging situations. Practice emotional matching when appropriate. If someone comes to you upset about something, matching their energy level initially shows that you understand the importance of their concern. If they're excited about an opportunity, Sharing some of their enthusiasm demonstrates support. However, if someone is angry or anxious, you don't want to match those emotions exactly. Instead, acknowledge their feelings while modeling the emotional state that would be more helpful for problem solving. Use emotional labeling to help others process their feelings. When someone is struggling to articulate what they're experiencing, you can help by reflecting what you're observing. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated about the lack of communication, or, I can see that this situation is really disappointing for you. This validation often helps people feel understood while giving them language for their experience. Develop your emotional contagion awareness. Emotions are highly contagious, and most people unconsciously absorb the emotional states of people around them. In groups, pay attention to the overall emotional atmosphere. Is it tense, excited, worried, optimistic? Understanding the emotional climate helps you respond appropriately, rather than being unconsciously influenced by it. Practice strategic emotional influence. This is not about manipulation, but about consciously modeling the emotional states that would be most beneficial for everyone involved. If you want a calm, productive meeting, embody calm confidence yourself. If you want to inspire innovation, bring curiosity and excitement to the interaction. If you want to resolve conflict, model openness and goodwill. Your emotional state influences others more than you realize, and you can use this influence responsibly to improve outcomes for everyone. Master the art of emotional pivoting in conversations. When interactions start moving in unproductive emotional directions, skilled emotional intelligence allows you to gently guide them toward more helpful states. This might involve asking questions that shift focus from problems to solutions, acknowledging emotions while introducing different perspectives, or using humor appropriately to release tension and create connection. Chapter 24. The trigger immunity that neutralizes your emotional buttons. Everyone has emotional triggers, specific situations, words, or behaviors that consistently provoke intense reactions. Maybe it's being interrupted, criticized, ignored, or treated unfairly. Maybe it's certain tones of voice, facial expressions, or ways of being spoken to. These triggers often develop from past experiences where you felt hurt, threatened, or powerless, and they continue to activate your fight or flight response even in situations that aren't actually dangerous. Understanding and neutralizing your triggers is essential for emotional control because triggered responses are rarely wise, effective, or aligned with your values. When you're triggered, you're reacting to the past rather than responding to the present situation. You're being controlled by old wounds rather than current wisdom. This leads to overreactions that damage relationships, poor decisions that create problems, and behaviors that don't reflect who you actually want to be. The first step in developing trigger immunity is identifying your specific triggers with precision. Most people know they get upset about certain things but haven't analyzed exactly what element triggers them. Is it the criticism itself, or the dismissive tone in which it's delivered? Is it being ignored, or the story you tell yourself about what it means when someone doesn't respond to you? Is it conflict itself, or the feeling of being misunderstood during disagreements? The more precisely you can identify your triggers, the more effectively you can work with them. Practice the trigger archaeology technique. When you have a strong emotional reaction, afterwards analyze what specifically set you off. What was the exact moment your emotional state shifted? What words, behaviors, or circumstances preceded the trigger? What story did your mind immediately create about what was happening? What past experiences does this situation remind you of? This analysis helps you understand the pattern rather than just being confused by the intensity of your reaction. Once you identify a trigger pattern, you can practice the pre-trigger intervention. Since triggers often follow predictable patterns, you can learn to recognize the early warning signs before you're fully activated. Maybe you notice tension in your shoulders, a change in your breathing, or certain thoughts arising. When you catch these early signals, you can use breathing techniques, reframing, or other emotional regulation tools before you're fully triggered. Develop trigger-specific responses for your most common activation patterns. For criticism triggers, you might practice immediately asking clarifying questions instead of getting defensive. For feeling ignored triggers, You might practice giving people the benefit of the doubt rather than assuming negative intentions. For unfairness triggers, you might practice focusing on what you can control rather than what you can't. Having predetermined responses helps you choose wisely instead of reacting automatically. Practice the trigger reframe technique. Most triggers are based on stories about what certain behaviors mean about you, about other people, or about the situation. Someone interrupting you means they don't respect you. Someone not responding quickly means they don't care about you. Someone giving you feedback means they think you're incompetent. But these stories are usually inaccurate and always unhelpful. Practice creating alternative explanations that are more neutral or generous. Maybe they interrupted because they're excited about the conversation. Maybe they didn't respond because they're overwhelmed with their own responsibilities. Maybe they gave feedback because they want to help you succeed. Use exposure therapy for persistent triggers. If certain situations consistently trigger you, practice deliberately exposing yourself to mild versions of those situations while using your emotional regulation tools. This gradually desensitizes you to the trigger while building your confidence in your ability to handle it. Start with very manageable exposure and gradually increase the difficulty as your capacity grows. Work on healing the underlying wounds that created your triggers. Many trigger patterns stem from past experiences where you felt helpless, rejected, or hurt. These experiences created beliefs about what certain behaviors mean and what you need to do to protect yourself. While you can manage triggers through regulation techniques, healing the underlying wounds often requires deeper therapeutic work to resolve the original pain and update your protective strategies. Remember that other people's behavior is usually not about you, even when it activates your triggers. People act based on their own stress levels, communication styles, personalities, and circumstances. When you take their behavior personally, you give them power over your emotional state. When you recognize that their behavior reflects their own inner world rather than their opinion of you, you become free to respond based on the actual situation rather than your triggered interpretation. The goal is not to become emotionless or to never be affected by difficult situations. The goal is to choose your responses consciously rather than being controlled by automatic reaction patterns. When you develop trigger immunity, you become unshakable in your core sense of self while remaining open and engaged with the world around you. Chapter 25. The Calm Confidence Code that commands respect without aggression. True confidence is not about being loud, dominating conversations, or proving your superiority to others. Authentic confidence is a quiet inner knowing that you can handle whatever situations arise, that your worth doesn't depend on others' approval, and that you can express yourself honestly without attacking or defending. This type of confidence is magnetic because it creates safety for others while demonstrating strength that doesn't need to prove itself. Most people confuse confidence with arrogance, aggression, or performance. They think confidence means never showing vulnerability, always having the right answer, or never backing down from a position. But these behaviors actually stem from insecurity and the need to protect a fragile ego. True confidence allows for uncertainty, admits mistakes, and changes course when presented with better information. It's strong enough to be gentle, secure enough to be vulnerable, and self-assured enough to put others at ease. The foundation of calm confidence is emotional self-regulation. When you're not controlled by your emotional reactions, you can respond to any situation from a place of choice rather than reactivity. This creates a natural authority that people respect because they sense that you won't be thrown off balance by challenges, criticism, or unexpected developments. You become someone who can be counted on to remain steady when things get difficult. Develop confident body language that reflects your inner state. Stand and sit with good posture, not because you're trying to look confident, but because you're honoring your physical presence in the space. Make appropriate eye contact that shows you're present and engaged without staring aggressively. Move deliberately rather than frantically. Take up your fair share of space without being expansive in ways that encroach on others. These physical practices both express and reinforce your inner confidence. Practice confident communication that is clear, direct, and respectful. Say what you mean without hedging, qualifying, or apologizing for having opinions. Use declarative statements rather than questions when expressing your thoughts. Instead of, "I think maybe we should possibly consider," try, "I recommend that we." Replace, "I'm sorry, but," with, "I'd like to," or "I need to." This doesn't mean being rude or inflexible, but it does mean communicating with clarity and conviction. Master the art of confident listening. Truly confident people don't need to dominate conversations or prove their intelligence by talking constantly. They ask good questions, listen with genuine interest, and respond thoughtfully. This type of engaged listening demonstrates confidence in your ability to learn from others and your security in your own knowledge and perspective. It also makes others feel valued and heard, which increases their respect for you. Develop outcome independence, which is the ability to do your best work and express yourself authentically without being attached to specific results. When you need particular outcomes to feel okay about yourself, you become anxious and controlling in ways that actually reduce your effectiveness and attractiveness. When you can pursue goals wholeheartedly while accepting that you cannot control all outcomes, you project the kind of calm confidence that naturally influences others. Practice setting boundaries with confidence and kindness. Confident people don't need to be aggressive or rude to maintain their boundaries. They simply state what works for them and what doesn't work for them, then follow through consistently. "I'm not available for calls after 8 p.m. I don't discuss my personal finances," or "I need to think about that before giving you an answer." These statements are clear without being apologetic or defensive. Handle criticism and disagreement with confident grace. When someone challenges your ideas or gives you negative feedback, confident people don't immediately get defensive or dismissive. They listen to understand what might be useful in the feedback, ask clarifying questions if needed, and respond based on merit rather than emotion. "Thank you for that perspective. I hadn't considered that angle," or "I disagree with your conclusion, but I understand your reasoning," are examples of confident responses to challenging feedback. Use confident conflict resolution that seeks understanding rather than victory. When disagreements arise, confident people focus on solving problems rather than being right. They acknowledge valid points from the other person, express their own perspective clearly, and work collaboratively toward solutions that work for everyone involved. This approach resolves conflicts more effectively while maintaining relationships and respect. The ultimate expression of calm confidence is the ability to make others feel comfortable and capable in your presence. When you're secure in yourself, you don't need to diminish others to feel important. You can celebrate their successes, acknowledge their contributions, and help them shine without feeling threatened. This generosity of spirit, combined with your own inner stability, creates the kind of magnetic presence that naturally attracts respect, opportunities, and meaningful relationships. Chapter 26. The emotional reset button that restores inner peace. Even with all the emotional regulation skills in the world, you will still have days when you feel off balance, overwhelmed, or disconnected from your best self. Life includes unavoidable stressors, unexpected challenges, and circumstances that temporarily throw you off your emotional equilibrium. The key is not avoiding these disruptions, but knowing how to reset yourself quickly and effectively when they occur. Think of your emotional reset practices like rebooting a computer. When a computer starts running slowly or experiencing errors, restarting it clears the cache, refreshes the system, and restores optimal functioning. Your emotional system works similarly. When stress, fatigue, or challenging circumstances accumulate, you need reliable practices that clear your mental and emotional cache and restore your natural state of calm, clarity, and connection. The most powerful emotional reset is what I call the complete pause. This involves temporarily stepping away from whatever is demanding your attention and giving yourself space to breathe, think clearly, and reconnect with your center. This might mean taking a walk outside, sitting quietly for a few minutes, or engaging in any activity that gives your nervous system a chance to settle. The key is fully disconnecting from the source of stress rather than trying to reset while remaining in the challenging situation. Practice the physical reset through movement and breathing. When you're emotionally activated, stress energy gets trapped in your body and continues to influence your mental state until it's discharged. Vigorous exercise, dancing, stretching, or even just shaking your body can help release this accumulated tension. Combine movement with conscious breathing to maximize the reset effect. Deep, slow breathing signals your nervous system to shift from stress mode to recovery mode. Use the mental reset through perspective practices. When you're caught up in immediate concerns, temporarily zoom out to see the bigger picture. How will this situation matter in 5 years? What would you tell a friend facing the same challenge? What opportunities might be hidden in this difficulty? What has this experience taught you about your own resilience? These perspective shifts help you step out of reactive thinking and reconnect with your wisdom. Practice the emotional reset through self-compassion. When you're struggling, your inner critic often makes things worse by adding self-judgment to whatever you're already dealing with. Treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer a good friend going through a difficult time. Acknowledge that everyone struggles sometimes, that you're doing your best with the resources you have, and that this difficult period will pass. This self-compassion creates the emotional safety needed for your system to relax and reset. Create a sensory reset through environment and experiences that naturally calm your nervous system. This might include listening to music that moves you, spending time in nature, taking a warm bath, cuddling with a pet, or engaging with any textures, sounds, or visual experiences that help you feel grounded and peaceful. Different people find different sensory experiences restorative, so experiment to discover what works best for you. Use the social reset through connection with supportive people who help you feel understood and cared for. Sometimes the fastest way to reset your emotional state is through interaction with someone who sees the best in you and reminds you of your own strength and capability. This might be a brief conversation with a friend, a hug from a family member, or any form of connection that helps you feel less alone and more resourced. Practice the meaning reset by reconnecting with your values and purpose. When you're overwhelmed by immediate pressures, you can lose sight of why your life and work matter. Take time to remember what you care most deeply about, how your current challenges fit into your larger goals, and what kind of person you want to become through this experience. This meaning-making helps transform random suffering into purposeful growth. Develop a complete reset ritual that you can use when you need a deeper restoration. This might include a combination of physical activity, meditation, journaling, time in nature, creative expression, or any practices that help you process what you've been through and reconnect with your best self. Having a predetermined reset ritual makes it more likely you'll use these practices when you need them most. The key insight about emotional resets is that they're most effective when used proactively rather than waiting until you're completely overwhelmed. Just like regular car maintenance prevents major breakdowns, regular emotional resets prevent minor stresses from accumulating into major emotional crises. Build reset practices into your daily and weekly routine rather than only using them in emergencies. Remember that needing emotional resets is not a sign of weakness or failure. It's a sign that you're human, that you care about things that matter, and that you're engaged with life in ways that occasionally require recovery. The strongest people are not those who never get knocked off balance, but those who know how to restore their equilibrium quickly and effectively when disruptions occur. Chapter 27. The Emotional Mastery Mindset That Makes Control Effortless. After working through all these techniques and strategies, it's important to understand that emotional mastery is not a destination, but a continuous practice. It's not about achieving perfect emotional control and never being triggered again. It's about developing such skill and awareness that emotional regulation becomes increasingly natural and effortless. You're building new neural pathways that will eventually make wise responses more automatic than reactive patterns. The mastery mindset embraces the learning process rather than demanding immediate perfection. Every emotional challenge becomes an opportunity to practice these skills and deepen your capability. Every trigger that arises gives you a chance to apply what you've learned. Every setback provides information about areas that still need attention. When you approach emotional development with curiosity and patience, rather than self-criticism and urgency, you learn faster and enjoy the process more. Understand that mastery involves integration across all areas of your life. It's not enough to practice emotional regulation during designated times or in easy situations. The goal is to integrate these skills so thoroughly that they become part of how you naturally move through the world. You want to reach the point where staying calm under pressure, responding thoughtfully to triggers, and maintaining inner equilibrium becomes your default mode rather than something you have to consciously work to achieve. Practice the observer mindset that creates space between you and your experiences. The more you can observe your thoughts and emotions from a slight distance rather than being completely identified with them, the more choice you have about how to respond. You begin to recognize that you are not your emotions. You are the one experiencing emotions. You are not your thoughts. You are the one observing thoughts. This observer capacity is what allows you to choose wisely instead of being controlled by automatic patterns. Develop what I call emotional aikido, the ability to use the energy of difficult emotions and challenging situations to create positive outcomes. Instead of resisting or fighting against emotional activation, you learn to redirect that energy in productive directions. Anger becomes fuel for positive change. Fear becomes motivation for preparation. Sadness becomes compassion for yourself and others. Frustration becomes determination to find better solutions. This approach transforms every emotion into a potential ally rather than an enemy to be defeated. Cultivate emotional generosity, which is the ability to help others regulate their emotions through your own stability and presence. When you're no longer overwhelmed by your own emotional reactions, you have capacity to support others in their emotional struggles. You become someone who can stay calm when others are panicked, remain compassionate when others are angry, and provide steady presence when others are overwhelmed. This emotional generosity strengthens your relationships while reinforcing your own emotional stability. Practice the long-game perspective that sees every emotional challenge as training for bigger tests ahead. Life has a way of presenting increasingly complex situations that require greater emotional skill to navigate successfully. The relationship conflicts, work pressures, and personal setbacks you face today are preparing you for the leadership challenges, family responsibilities, and life transitions that await you in the future. When you see current difficulties as training opportunities rather than inconveniences, you develop the emotional capacity needed for whatever life brings. Embrace the paradox of emotional mastery. The more skilled you become at emotional regulation, the more deeply you're able to feel. Mastery is not about becoming numb or disconnected from your emotions. It's about being able to feel everything fully while maintaining your center and choosing your responses wisely. This allows you to love more deeply, create more passionately, and engage with life more fully because you're not afraid of the intensity of human experience. Remember that emotional mastery serves something greater than just your own comfort and convenience. When you're not controlled by reactive emotions, you become more available to serve others, contribute to meaningful causes, and make a positive difference in the world. Your emotional stability becomes a gift, not just to yourself, but to everyone whose lives you touch. You become someone who can be counted on in difficult times, who brings calm to chaotic situations, and who models the possibility of responding to life's challenges with wisdom rather than reactivity. This is the true promise of emotional mastery, not just a better life for yourself, but the capacity to help create a better world through your presence, choices, and example. The journey of emotional control is ultimately a journey of becoming the most authentic, wise, and compassionate version of yourself possible. Chapter 28. The integration protocol that makes emotional control automatic. Knowing these techniques intellectually is not the same as having them available when you need them most. The gap between understanding emotional regulation and actually applying it in challenging moments is where most people struggle. This is why integration is the most critical phase of emotional mastery. You need to practice these skills so thoroughly that they become automatic responses rather than conscious efforts you have to remember to use. Think of it like learning to drive a car. Initially, you have to consciously think about every action, checking mirrors, signaling, managing speed, watching for obstacles. But with enough practice, most of driving becomes automatic. You navigate complex traffic situations without consciously thinking through each decision. Emotional regulation follows the same pattern. With sufficient practice, responding wisely to triggers, reframing negative thoughts, and maintaining calm under pressure becomes as automatic as steering around a curve. The key to integration is consistent daily practice, rather than only using these tools during crises. Athletes don't wait until game day to practice their skills. Musicians don't only play during performances. Similarly, you need to practice emotional regulation during calm moments, so the skills are available during storm moments. This daily practice builds the neural pathways that make wise responses more likely when you're under pressure. Create a daily emotional fitness routine just as you might create a physical fitness routine. This might include morning breathing exercises that set a calm tone for the day, periodic emotional check-ins throughout the day, evening reflection on how you handled various situations, and regular practice of specific techniques like reframing or trigger management. The key is consistency rather than duration. 10 minutes of daily practice will create more lasting change than sporadic hour-long sessions. Practice progressive exposure by deliberately putting yourself in mildly challenging situations where you can apply your emotional regulation skills. If you struggle with criticism, ask for feedback in low-stakes situations. If you get triggered by being interrupted, practice having conversations where you allow natural interruptions to occur without getting defensive. If you have social anxiety, gradually increase your social activities while using your anxiety management tools. This progressive exposure builds your confidence and competence gradually, rather than waiting for challenging situations to arise randomly. Use real-life laboratories by treating your daily interactions as opportunities to practice emotional mastery. Every difficult conversation, frustrating delay, or stressful situation becomes a chance to apply what you've learned. Instead of dreading these challenges, start seeing them as valuable practice opportunities. This mindset shift alone reduces the emotional impact of difficult situations while accelerating your skill development. Create implementation intentions by deciding in advance how you'll handle common emotional challenges. Instead of hoping you'll remember to breathe when you get triggered, decide specifically, when I feel my face getting hot during a difficult conversation, I will take 3 deep breaths before responding. Instead of hoping you'll reframe negative thoughts, decide, when I catch myself catastrophizing, I will immediately ask myself what else this situation could mean. These pre-planned responses increase the likelihood you'll use your skills when you need them. Track your progress through regular self-assessment and celebration of improvements. Notice when you handle situations better than you used to, when you catch yourself sooner in negative patterns, or when you recover more quickly from emotional disruptions. This positive reinforcement strengthens your commitment to the practice while building confidence in your growing capabilities. Many people focus only on their mistakes and forget to acknowledge their progress. Develop emotional regulation habits that support your practice. This includes getting adequate sleep. Emotional regulation requires significant mental energy, maintaining stable blood sugar through regular healthy meals, engaging in regular physical activity that discharges stress energy, limiting excessive caffeine or alcohol that can destabilize your nervous system, and creating environments that support calm rather than constantly trigger stress responses. Your emotional regulation capacity is affected by your overall physical and mental health. Practice teaching these concepts to others. When you explain emotional regulation principles to friends, family members, or colleagues, you deepen your own understanding while creating accountability for applying what you teach. You also contribute to creating more emotionally intelligent communities where everyone benefits from greater emotional awareness and skill. Create accountability through partnerships with others who are also working on emotional growth. This might involve regular check-ins with a friend about how you're each applying emotional regulation skills, joining groups focused on emotional intelligence development, or working with a therapist or coach who can provide guidance and support for your practice. External accountability often helps maintain consistency when motivation fluctuates. Remember that integration happens in layers. You might master emotional regulation in some contexts before others. You might find some techniques work better for you than others. You might have periods of significant progress followed by temporary setbacks. This is all part of the natural integration process. The key is persistence and self-compassion rather than expecting linear progress toward perfection. Chapter 29. The Ripple Effect Revolution that transforms your entire life. As you develop emotional mastery, you'll discover that the benefits extend far beyond just feeling better or handling stress more effectively. Emotional control creates positive ripple effects that transform every area of your life in ways you might not have anticipated. These changes often happen gradually, but their cumulative impact is revolutionary. Your relationships improve dramatically because you're no longer controlled by reactive patterns that damage trust and connection. When you stop taking things personally, you become easier to be around. When you can handle conflict without getting defensive, people feel safer being honest with you. When you can listen without getting triggered, others feel heard and understood. When you can express your needs without attacking or withdrawing, you create space for genuine intimacy. These relationship improvements compound over time as people learn they can count on you to remain stable and thoughtful even during difficult conversations. Your career accelerates because emotional regulation is one of the most valued traits in professional environments. Leaders want to promote people who can handle pressure without falling apart. Colleagues want to work with people who don't create drama or take things personally. Clients trust people who remain calm and professional even when things go wrong. Your reputation for emotional stability becomes a significant professional asset that opens opportunities you might not have otherwise received. Your decision-making improves dramatically when you're not controlled by fear, anger, or other reactive emotions. You can evaluate opportunities objectively rather than being paralyzed by anxiety about what might go wrong. You can end relationships or jobs that aren't working rather than staying in bad situations due to fear of change. You can take calculated risks rather than either being reckless due to overconfidence or missing opportunities due to excessive fear. This improved decision-making creates better outcomes across all areas of your life. Your physical health benefits from reduced chronic stress and improved emotional processing. When you're not constantly activating your fight or flight response, your immune system functions better, your sleep improves, your digestion works more efficiently, and your cardiovascular system experiences less wear and tear. The mind-body connection means that emotional regulation directly supports physical wellness in measurable ways. Your creativity and productivity increase when mental energy isn't being drained by emotional reactivity and interpersonal drama. When you're not spending time replaying arguments, worrying about what others think, or recovering from emotional outbursts, you have more cognitive resources available for meaningful work and creative expression. You also become more innovative because you're not afraid of making mistakes or being criticized for trying new approaches. Your parenting transforms as you model emotional regulation for your children while helping them develop these skills themselves. Children learn more from what they observe than from what they're taught verbally. When they see you handling frustration calmly, processing disappointment gracefully, and responding to their difficult behaviors with patience rather than reactivity, they internalize these patterns as normal. This gives them emotional advantages that will serve them throughout their lives. Your leadership capacity expands because people naturally follow those who remain calm and wise under pressure. Whether you're leading in formal positions or informal situations, your emotional stability becomes a source of strength that others draw upon. You become someone others turn to for guidance during difficult times because they trust your judgment and your ability to remain clear-headed when emotions are running high. Your contribution to society increases because you're not consumed by your own emotional drama and reactivity. When your inner world is stable and peaceful, you have capacity to focus on bigger problems and opportunities. You can contribute to your community, support important causes, and work toward positive change rather than being completely absorbed by managing your own emotional struggles. You become part of the solution rather than part of the problem in creating a more emotionally intelligent world. Your spiritual development deepens as emotional regulation creates space for contemplation, gratitude, and connection to what matters most. When you're not constantly reactive to external circumstances, you can appreciate the beauty that's always available, feel genuine gratitude for what you have, and connect with your deeper values and purpose. This spiritual dimension of emotional mastery often becomes a source of strength and meaning that sustains your practice through difficult times. Your legacy improves because the people whose lives you touch benefit from your emotional wisdom and stability. The patience you show, the calm you maintain during crises, and the wisdom you demonstrate in difficult situations ripples out to influence others long after specific interactions are over. Children who experience your emotional regulation carry those patterns forward. Colleagues who witness your professional grace adopt similar approaches. Friends who receive your non-reactive support develop greater emotional capacity themselves. The ultimate ripple effect is that emotional mastery becomes contagious. As you demonstrate the possibility of responding to life's challenges with wisdom rather than reactivity, you give others permission and inspiration to develop these same capabilities. You become living proof that emotional control is possible, and this example can spark transformation in others that extends far beyond your direct influence. This is how individual emotional mastery contributes to collective emotional evolution and the creation of more wise and compassionate communities. Chapter 30. The lifelong practice that sustains emotional mastery forever. Emotional mastery is not a destination you reach and then maintain effortlessly. It's a lifelong practice that requires ongoing attention, refinement, and growth. Just as physical fitness requires consistent exercise throughout your life, emotional fitness requires consistent practice to maintain and continue developing. The goal is not to achieve perfect emotional control once and for all, but to continue growing in wisdom, resilience, and skillful responsiveness throughout your entire life journey. Understand that your emotional challenges will evolve as you grow and face new life circumstances. The triggers that challenge you in your 20s may be different from those you face in your 40s or 60s. Career pressures, relationship dynamics, health challenges, family responsibilities, and personal losses all present new emotional learning opportunities throughout your life. The skills you've developed will serve you in all these situations, but you'll also need to adapt and expand them as your circumstances change. Embrace what I call beginner's mind in your emotional development. Even as you become more skilled at emotional regulation, maintain curiosity about new aspects of emotional intelligence to explore. There are always deeper levels of self-awareness to discover, more sophisticated techniques to master, and more challenging situations to navigate skillfully. This beginner's mind prevents complacency while maintaining the excitement of continuous growth and learning. Create ongoing learning opportunities through books, courses, workshops, therapy, or coaching that continue expanding your emotional intelligence. Just as professionals in other fields engage in continuing education to stay current with best practices, investing in ongoing emotional development keeps your skills sharp while introducing new perspectives and techniques. The field of emotional intelligence continues evolving, and staying connected to new developments enhances your practice. Build a supportive community of others who are committed to emotional growth and wisdom. This might include friends who share these values, professional groups focused on emotional intelligence, spiritual communities that emphasize inner development, or any other contexts where emotional maturity is valued and supported. Having community around these practices provides encouragement during difficult times while creating accountability for maintaining your growth trajectory. Regular self-assessment becomes increasingly important as your practice matures. Periodically evaluate your progress, identify areas where you've grown, and set new challenges for yourself. Celebrate your improvements while remaining honest about areas that still need development. Adjust your practices based on what you've learned about yourself and what's working best for your personality and lifestyle. This ongoing self-assessment ensures your practice remains relevant and effective as you continue evolving. Practice teaching and mentoring others in emotional regulation as a way to deepen your own understanding while contributing to others' development. Teaching forces you to articulate concepts clearly, answer challenging questions, and think deeply about the principles you've learned. Mentoring others who are earlier in their emotional development journey reminds you of how far you've come while providing opportunities to apply your skills in service of others' growth. Remember that mastery includes embracing the full spectrum of human emotion rather than just managing difficult feelings. As you become more emotionally skilled, you also become capable of experiencing joy, love, excitement, and passion more fully because you're not afraid of emotional intensity. True emotional mastery allows you to feel deeply while maintaining your center, to be moved by beauty and meaning while staying grounded in wisdom. Develop what I call emotional artistry, the ability to consciously choose emotional responses that create beauty, connection, and positive outcomes in any situation. This goes beyond just regulating negative emotions to actively cultivating emotional states that serve your highest values and contribute to the well-being of everyone involved. You become an artist of human experience, consciously crafting interactions and responses that bring out the best in yourself and others. Maintain perspective about the ultimate purpose of emotional mastery. The goal is not to become invulnerable or disconnected from the natural rhythms of human experience. The goal is to become wise enough to respond to whatever life brings with love, compassion, and skillful action. This wisdom allows you to be fully human while transcending the unconscious reactivity that keeps most people trapped in cycles of suffering and conflict. Your ongoing practice becomes a gift not just to yourself, but to everyone whose life you touch. Every moment you choose wisdom over reactivity, compassion over defensiveness, and understanding over judgment contributes to the healing and elevation of human consciousness. Your individual emotional mastery becomes part of the larger work of creating a more conscious, kind, and wise world. This is both the privilege and the responsibility of those who choose the path of emotional development. As you continue this practice throughout your life, remember that perfection is not the goal, progress is. Every day offers new opportunities to apply what you've learned while learning something new about yourself and the human condition. Every challenge becomes a chance to deepen your wisdom. Every relationship becomes an opportunity to practice love without attachment, and every emotional reaction becomes information to guide your continued growth. This is the beauty of lifelong emotional practice. It transforms ordinary human experience into a continuous journey of wisdom, growth, and service. You become not just someone who has mastered your emotions, but someone who embodies the possibility of human wisdom and compassion. This transformation ripples out to touch every life you encounter, creating positive change that extends far beyond what you can measure or imagine. The work you do on yourself becomes a contribution to the collective evolution of human consciousness and the creation of a more emotionally intelligent world for all.